Okay, we are now recording.
Okay, I am calling this meeting to order, our Transportation Advisory Board meeting for March 2023. My name is Ryan Schuhard. I am the Vice Chair of TAB, acting tonight as the Chair, as Alex away. So quick roll call. I see we have Becky, Trini, and Thilas, and me. So that makes 4. We have quorum. And I think that Veronica takes us to you to read some instructions.
Yes. All right. Well, hello, everyone. We're pleased for you to join us today. This meeting has been called to conduct the business of the City of Boulder. Activities that disrupt, delay, or otherwise interfere with the meetings are prohibited. The time for speaking is limited to 3 minutes. No person shall speak except when recognized by myself, and no person shall speak longer than the time allotted. Each person shall register to speak at the meeting using their real name. Any person believed to be using a name other than the one they are commonly known by will not be permitted to speak. Please use the raise hand function to be recognized for public comments. If you're on your phone, you will need to press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. No video will be permitted except for city officials, employees, and invited speakers and presenters. All others will participate by voice only. The person presiding at the meeting shall enforce these rules by muting anyone who violates any rules. The question and answer function is enabled. It will be used for individuals to communicate with myself. It should only be used for technical online platform related questions only. If an attendee attempts to use chat for any other reason than seeking assistance for technical help, we reserve the right to disable the individual's access to the chat. Only the host and individuals designated by myself will be permitted to share their screens during the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Veronica. Okay, next on to approval of the minutes from our last meeting, February. Any suggested changes from the board? Tila.
Thanks, Ryan. I wasn't here for part of the meeting, so I just plan to abstain on the approval. I have no substantive changes, but like the question I had in reviewing the minutes, and it was during the part I wasn't here, was on agenda item 4 about the Millennium property at 1345 28th Street. It said the questions for TAB included does TAB support the proposed amendment to the BVRC Transportation Connections Plan? Was any amendment discussed, voted on, approved? Is there any like resolution language that's missing here? I just don't know, but that's a question I wanted to ask.
Tila, was that directed at staff or TAB?
I suppose TAB, because TAB's supposed to be approving the minutes, but if staff has any recollection that will refresh TAB's recollection, that would help.
Becky or Trini, anything from you?
I'm sorry, Brian, I have to correct you. My name is Trini. So I've been wanting to say that for a while. So I seem to be having a really bad connection. I'm hearing myself like double. So I'm gonna log out and log back in if that's okay. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I don't recall in the order of things from that meeting. There was an exact motion or not.
Yeah, so I can help. I think there was not any motion from TAB, and I don't think that they were looking for, unless there was a desire from TAB, there wasn't specific action that was being requested by PNDS staff on that one.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think we offered some substantive input, but I don't know that we were asked for it. I had questions.
Because in reading the menu, in reading the memo and then seeing the questions for TAB outlined here in the minutes, it does appear we were asked to weigh in on whether we oppose amending the BVRC Transportation Connections Plan, because the proposal would amend.
Yeah, and TAB, I would say, and definitely correct me if I'm wrong here, Ryan and others, but I think you definitely provided feedback. And then there was no formal action taken.
Yeah, I think that's right. Now I'm just looking at the minutes.
I think there was some concern, Tila, regarding the added bike riders that were gonna be, the increased ridership, and how, especially Ryan was talking about, there's a path that goes like behind the Safeway. I don't know if you're familiar with it, like behind Flower Child and the Safeway. So there was a big discussion about that, but yeah, like Valerie said, I don't remember any
Okay.
approved- Natalie, sorry.
Okay, so the minutes just aren't clear whether Tab approved or proposed the proposed amendment or disapproved of the proposed amendment. Sounds like it did neither. Okay, thank you.
Teal, thank you for that. I think, yeah, perhaps I would suggest we clarify that in the minutes to say that basically what you just said, that Tab did not approve nor disapprove, but just provided considerations, something like that.
Feedback.
Yeah, because we did have some concerns. So, Teal, would you be willing to offer, what's a succinct way to, as our veteran chair here, what's a good way to do this procedurally?
I wasn't even there.
No, but I mean, just to make a motion, what is there a succinct way to say this, to add to the minutes, just that Tab did not provide a recommendation, or did not approve or
I think that's fine. Tab did not provide a recommendation on the proposed amendment to the BVRC Transportation Connections Plan.
Great. Can we, so do we need to write this down then to get it?
Usually our secretary, if we state it succinctly enough, and I hope I just did, usually our secretary can handle entering the amendment.
Thank you.
Okay. Should we, Meredith, should we ask you to read what you would write, or is there a, then we make a motion and vote on that? Is that the best way to do this?
Ryan, I don't believe that a motion is required. What I have preliminarily entered is, it was noted that the Tab did not provide a formal recommendation on the proposed amendment.
Okay.
And I'll check Tila's exact language from the transcript.
That sounds great to me. Any others comments on either that or any other aspects of the minutes? Okay, then I will entertain a motion to approve February's minutes with the changes Meredith is committed to making.
I second it. I second it.
Okay. Who made the motion? Sorry. I'm entertaining a motion. So someone needs to make a motion, right?
Yes.
Ryan, you make the motion, Trini seconded, and
Okay.
you can call for the vote.
Thank you. I thought I needed to entertain the motion for another colleague to make, but great. Okay. Learning as we go. Thanks everyone. So we just need to vote now. Is that right? We have a motion and a second. Tila?
I will abstain because I was missing for part of it.
Okay. So we've got three. All right. Okay. I think that does it for the minutes then. So let's move on. We had two main items today, a discussion on the snow and ice response review project and an update on the final Vision Zero action plan progress. We don't have a public hearing, so we'll take any and all public comment just shortly now in the next piece. So we'll move on to public comment. And if any members of the public wish to comment on items on the agenda or otherwise, now is the time, and we would love to hear from you. You will have 2 minutes each, and please just raise your hand in the chat and I will call on you.
Cool. I'll take it on from here, and a correction, everyone gets 3 minutes to speak, and I'll put the timer on my screen. So first we have Stephen Heidel. I am gonna ask you to unmute if you could confirm that you are able to speak.
Hello.
Perfect. Your 3 minutes
Okay.
begin now.
Mine, it's just on the Vision Zero action plan on the signals. It seems like it was with the protected left signals and no right on red. There's a line item in there, but it's sort of weak. It said just can go to the signal practices. A week ago, we had a major wreck on Arapahoe at Conestoga East. And all of those signals are flashing yellow arrow. I don't know if they're all the time or most of the time. Where if it was a protected left, the Subaru driver would not have been in an intersection with the Tesla driver doing 105 hitting them. It's just one of those things where our signal practices are still primary level of service is priority, especially on Arapahoe. I almost got run over by a car turning left at Arapahoe and Folsom with my granddaughter. And that's all just level of service. They had a flashing yellow, then they almost turned into us. Luckily, the other car stopped and that car stopped. But if it was protected left and it wouldn't have happened. I know like Arapahoe and 29th heading into the mall, there used to be a flashing yellow arrow, almost got hit. And luckily after a couple close calls, they changed that to a protected left where it's 3 lanes plus a multi-use path. So I think in the Vision Zero action plan, there needs to be more definite update on the signal practices for flashing yellow arrows and no right on red. It looks like they're going to lower the threshold to do that, but I think it just needs to be more concrete and really err on the side of safety over level of service. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mike Mills, I'm gonna ask you to unmute if you could confirm you're able to speak.
Hi, yeah, this is Mike.
Perfect. Your 3 minutes begin now.
Hey, I've lived in Boulder since 1990. A huge part of the draw for me living here has always been the off-street multi-use paths, which are amazing. Since getting an electric cargo bike several years ago, I have very few occasions on which I need to drive around Boulder anymore, and I've increased my commitment to reducing my car dependence to a minimum. And in that time, I've become more aware of how far Boulder has to go in creating protected bike lanes on our arterial network. While I see opportunities in Boulder's plans for its core arterial network, it's obvious that the brand new northbound bicycle lanes on North Broadway are a big step backwards in terms of safety, even from the painted bike gutters in the door zone that were there before them. I want to thank TAB for hearing concerns about this last month from a number of residents, including myself, and for expressing your own concerns. Alex Weinheimer's explanation of how this happened was news to me and gave perspective. I was happy to hear the solution that the city should ban parking inside the bike lanes from Becky Davies, who also spoke to the next city council meeting about this. The city must take action before a cyclist is sent down a poorly designed sloping curb and into car traffic. The death or injury of even one cyclist is simply too high a price to pay to subsidize a relatively small number of free curbside parking spaces for drivers. If removing parking creates a parking shortage, the answer is to charge the right price for street parking. As I'm sure many of you are aware, Donald Shoup wrote a 700-page book on the high cost of free parking. Let's not add the death or injury of cyclists to that cost. The bike lane was obviously designed to make cars feel welcome, and it endangers those who are not in a car. In a neighborhood plan to reduce the trap of car dependence, that's a travesty. Moving forward, the city must make cyclists and pedestrians feel welcome while accommodating cars, not prioritizing them or welcoming cars. City staff and TAB should co-request that City Council spot change the North Boulder sub-community plan to remove the parking so that staff can then install protective barriers. this needs to be done as soon as possible, and I would think by Memorial Day at the latest. Thank you.
Thank you. It doesn't look like anyone else has their. Oh, sorry, Lynn Siegel just raised her hand, so I will unmute Lynn. Lynn, could you confirm you're able to speak?
Is that Trini or Trini?
Trini.
Trini, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with your statement that came up ahead about the Millennium. It's 942 units there. There were 269 in the hotel before, and now we're losing that sales tax revenue, which goes straight into tab funds. We're losing all of that. And instead, we're getting the impact of 942 CU students causing a log jam right there on the bike path. It's horrific, you know, and combine that with the olive that's going up where Liquor Mart was, and the connection with CU and CU South, drawing all of Boulder to much more congestion, demand for services, demand for all kinds of, you know, asphalt, everything transportation related. It is very, very unwise to have to not have something to say strongly from TAB about that development of the Millennium. You're very right on with that. And regards to so many other developments in Boulder, particularly now, there's an insidious movement towards the missing middle, okay? And 300 square foot units on 22nd and Pearl. And now they're trying to do a second one. This is a development company called STOK. They're trying to do another one on Walnut and 17th. And these are these micro units that they're pushing. They're got robotic furniture in it. The bed goes up on the ceiling, and 300 square feet, you know, 1 or 2 people at the max are going to live in there. And they're going to have their electric bikes stolen from there. No, they aren't. They're getting, and there's no storage that the company that this development developer has described as in the apartment, a robotic arm that takes the bike up and then rotates it and stores it on the ceiling too. There's only so much room on the ceiling after the bed and all the other stuff. And these people are going to use Ubers and Lyfts because they do want to go places. They aren't just going to sit at the mall all day. They want to get around besides with just electric vehicles, and they want to transport materials because they have no storage to speak of in that place. And guess what they're going to do? Jam up the congestion all over the place. And this is being pushed big time. And you guys need to have some say about it. No on Skoke's development at 22nd and Pearl, and no on Walnut. This is not helping the missing middle. And it's also super expensive housing, and it's actually market rate. It's only missing middle until the project's approved. So do something about it or deal with it yourselves afterwards.
All right, thank you, Lynn. Ryan, I believe that was the last person with their hand raised.
Okay, thank you, Lynn, and the others who came to talk to us. Okay, let's move on to item number 4, staff update and TAB feedback on the snow and ice response review project. I'm gonna give this over to Scott.
Thank you, Ryan. Good evening, everyone. Daniel Sheeter and myself are here to present our snow and ice response review project. We'll walk through an overview of the project, highlights of our current program, our current community engagement efforts, and our next steps. Time at the end will be left for TAB feedback after our presentation. Next slide, please. So, a little project overview here. 1 second, I'll get to my notes. So the Snow and Ice Response Review Project will document and assess the current program, our service levels, and consider changes for more efficient and effective service delivery to better meet city and community expectations. And also increase the awareness of where snow and ice services are delivered and why they're delivered in those places, and engage the community in the update process to improve outcomes. Next slide, please. We're currently seeking community feedback on our existing program. This engagement opportunity is open until this Friday. We're also gathering benchmark information from peer cities along the Front Range and nationally to base our changes on. Next slide. Included in this project are potential changes to snow and ice clearing of streets, bus stops, multi-use paths, bike network, and shoveled areas maintained by the city's Transportation and Mobility Department, and initial implementation of operational changes that do not require budget changes. Next slide. This project does not include improvements to sidewalk snow removal, code enforcement processes, and increases to service levels that require additional funding. Improvements to the sidewalk code enforcement process could be considered as a separate future project. Implementation of any proposed changes to the program are dependent on available resources and may occur in the 2023-2024 winter season at the earliest. If increases to service levels are recommended, additional funds would need to be requested from City Council through a formal budget process for the 2025 budget year. Next slide. Some highlights from our current program. When snow falls, the highest priority for the department is to ensure safe travel for all modes of transportation and to maintain emergency response routes. The on-demand open house questionnaire asks for community feedback on changing or adding to these goals. Next slide. Streets, bus stops, multi-use paths, the bike network, and shoveled areas maintained by the city's Transportation Mobility Department are typically impacted by snow and ice during the official snow season, which runs Labor Day through Memorial Day. Once a storm is forecasted, streets and paths are pre-treated to reduce the buildup of snow and ice. Snow clearing equipment is readied and city staff are scheduled for 12-hour snow shifts, with crews working around the clock until streets and paths are cleared of loose snow and primary routes return to normal conditions. Some of the highlights on this is that we do clear 63% of our city-owned streets. 100% of the in-town bus routes are cleared. The $1.8 million average seasonal cost, unfortunately, does not include a lot of the fleet maintenance costs for our snow removal vehicles, as those are charged to other departments or other work groups in transportation. And that's about $450,000 cost per year additional for fleet charges. Next slide. City's transportation system includes over 850 lane miles of major streets, and those are arterials and collectors, local and residential streets. Partner agencies such as Boulder County and the Colorado Department of Transportation are responsible for clearing snow and ice from some roadways in and around the city. The first tier for the city's service approach focuses on key arterial streets, including emergency access routes, as well as access to hospitals, schools, critical infrastructure, and transit. Snow crews in 9 large plows return to these primary routes every 2 to 4 hours until the roadway is clear of loose snow and ice. Primary routes constitute approximately 250 lane miles citywide. Second tier of service is secondary routes to clear snow from the remaining arterial streets, as well as key local and residential streets which need service because of steep grade and or tree shade. The on-demand open house maps have grade and shade layers overlaid on top of secondary routes. 7 large plows clear approximately 200 lane miles of secondary routes every 3 to 5 hours during snowstorms. Final tier of service utilizes 2 plows to clear snow from select residential streets that are also impacted by steep grade and or tree shade. These conditional routes constitute approximately 27 miles of citywide and are cleared every 6 to 8 hours when there is 8 inches or more of snow and or the temperatures are forecasted to be below freezing for 3 days. This is based on a 2013 voter approved tax initiative that provided funding to plow these select streets. Resources required to plow all of the hundreds of miles of residential roadways in the city of Boulder are well beyond what can be staffed and funded with existing resources. After reviewing input from this initial round of engagement, the project will consider changes to program service levels, including but not limited to expansion of snow clearing on residential streets. If service levels are increased, additional funds would need to be requested from the city council for the 2025 budget year. Next slide. Sorry, mine is not advancing on my side. The city's multi-use path network covers nearly 90 total miles, of which the Transportation and Mobility Department maintains and clears snow from approximately 36 of those miles. Parks and Rec Department is responsible for over 23 miles of paths, while snow removal of other path segments is handled by CU Boulder, Boulder County, and other private entities. Transportation and Mobility Department clears snow from all 36 miles of paths it maintains during and after snowstorms. Small plows are utilized to move snow from the multi-use path network as well as adjacent key connectors. Next slide. Approximately 75% of the on-street bike network is plowed through primary, secondary, and conditional routes. This map illustrates all plow routes that clear snow from the on-street bike network. Next slide. City contracts crews to shovel snow from over 200 locations, including 38 high ridership bus stops and more than 100 high activity curb ramps and pedestrian crossings. Multiple passes of these areas are typically needed before they are completely clear. This map illustrates all shoveling locations except for bus stops. You can also see the city's sidewalk network on this map. Sidewalk snow removal is the responsibility of the adjacent property owners as per the Boulder Revised Code. Improvements to sidewalk snow removal code enforcement processes are not part of this project, but could be considered as a separate future project. City partners with Cultivate Snowbusters program to connect volunteers to residents who face challenges clearing snow from sidewalks around their homes. We do understand that there is more need for this program than volunteer interest, though. Next slide. There are 575 total bus stops in the city. The bus network includes multiple high-frequency routes that operate every 15 minutes or less, shown here as the bold red lines. High ridership stops with more than 50 passengers on average boarding and exiting per day, shown with gold circles, serve these routes. Next slide. Resources to shovel snow from the bus stops are directed to those high ridership stops. RTD and CU Boulder clear snow from over 100 bus stops. The city's contracted crews clear from an additional 38 high ridership stops. The city's Shovel a Stop program enlists volunteers to clear snow from the remaining bus stops, and 31 of those are currently adopted throughout the city. And with this next slide, I will pass it on to Daniel.
Thanks, Scott. Good evening, members of TAB. My name is Daniel Sheeter, Senior Transportation Planner, and I'll walk through the engagement plan for the project. 3 rounds of community engagement are planned for this year. The current round, launched on February 17th, is to inform the community of the existing snow and ice response services and gather input on satisfaction levels and ideas to consider when updating the program purpose and goals. After the project team has evaluated all of the feedback and identified options for potential program changes, another round of engagement is planned for fall to seek community feedback on those potential changes. The final round in late 2023 will inform the community of recommended program changes and implementation feasibility. As presented by Scott, initial implementation next winter would be limited to operational changes feasible with existing staff and resources. Increases to service levels requiring additional funding would require a formal budget request for the 2025 budget year. Now to walk through the project's engagement materials. for this round. First, we have a project webpage, of course, but I want to draw particular attention to a set of frequently asked questions on the program website. I definitely encourage everyone to visit this resource since it has a lot of great in-depth information about the program and was recently updated with the project. Next slide, please. The primary material for this round of engagement is an on-demand open house and corresponding questionnaire that launched on February 17th. Hope you all have had a chance to review it. The open house uses the same Esri story map platform as the open house for the Baseline Road Transportation Safety Project last fall. We really like this platform for communicating geographical or map-based data to a broader audience, so it was a natural fit for this project. All of the maps Scott walked you through were directly from the open house. We were also able to embed the Be Heard Boulder questionnaire right on the story map so that the public wouldn't have to visit separate web pages to learn about the program and provide their feedback. The story map was also entirely translated to Spanish, and the questionnaire is open through the end of this week. So we really are trying to get the word out here in the last couple days to get as many responses as we can. Next slide, please. The open house has been publicized through City of Boulder social media channels, as well as city newsletters and Inside Boulder News. And we're also doing that last final communications push this week to direct the community to the website. Next slide, please. The project sent a mailer to every residential and commercial address in the city since snow and ice response affects the entire city. This mailer was translated to Spanish as well and directed the public to the open house. Hopefully you all have received that by now. It should have been coming in last week and over the preceding weekend. The project team also consulted with the city's community connectors and residents late last month to understand their lived experiences with snow and ice response. A few of the key themes raised by the connectors include the importance of shoveling at bus stops for access, particularly in areas where people with disabilities live or travel to, prioritization of service with adjacency to senior housing and Boulder Housing Partners properties, the challenges of snow clearing responsibility for private streets, which fall outside of Transportation and Mobility Department jurisdiction, and finally, that the methods of program communications and requesting service are not well connected with people who need the service the most. The project team will incorporate this feedback into recommendations for potential program changes. The team also developed the racial equity instrument to inform the project. The instrument has defined engagement strategies, as well as ongoing equity index analysis that overlays program data, including service requests from Enquire Boulder, dating back all the way to 2015, existing residential street plowing, sidewalk snow removal code violations, and shoveling locations on the city's racial equity index map. This analysis is intended as a starting point as we apply an equity focus to potential program changes. Next slide, please. Finally, we have a robust set of stakeholders that the project is directly engaging with to get the word out about the open house and solicit feedback about the program. These include our transit operators, Boulder Valley School District, Boulder and Latino Chambers of Commerce, Center for People with Disabilities, National Federation of the Blind, as well as Community Cycles. So where are we at with this current round of engagement? Unsurprisingly, we've seen a lot of activity on the open house and questionnaire with over 3,500 views and 585 responses. The current level of response is similar to last year's citywide Vision Zero Action Plan questionnaire, which had 700 responses. And the view count has surpassed fall 2022's Baseline Road Transportation Safety Project open house, which had about 3,300 views. A few initial takeaways are that we're reaching a diverse set of ways people travel in Boulder. So as of about March 9th, about 60% of respondents identified as daily drivers or walkers, 20% as daily bikers, and 4% as daily transit users. This was a multi-select question if you're wondering why the percentages don't all add up to 100. We are also seeing very strong support for snow clearing on major streets as the first priority of the program, but it's too early to say where preferences lie for other components of the program. So on to the next steps. And where do we go from here? As I mentioned, this round of engagement will wrap up on March 17th. Staff will take the spring and summer to evaluate all of the feedback and develop options for potential program changes. The team will come back to the community, including TAB, this fall for feedback on options for potential program changes. And then final community engagement is planned for late 2023 with an initial implementation for winter 2023-2024. So here are the short links to both the English and Spanish versions of the open house, as well as project and program websites. You can screenshot this or look in your packet for these details. And appreciate getting the word out this week, or if you haven't submitted a questionnaire already, also getting in there and getting a questionnaire in. And that wraps up our slides, and we have a couple questions here for you all, and welcome opening up for discussion and additional questions.
Thank you, Daniel and Scott. My compliments on the presentation. That was really great, and that webpage really is quite deep with material. So kudos for all the hard work on this. So we have two questions before us, TAB colleagues. Would anybody like to? Let me think about this. Why don't we take them one at a time? So anybody like to respond to question one? Does the board have any questions about the project process and timeline? Teal says no. Becky says no. Trini says no. And I think I had one, Daniel, but you. Oh no, I do have one. My question is, when do you want substantive feedback from TAB?
I think, I mean, we welcome kind of a brief maybe discussion if you have a couple points you'd like to make tonight, but we're really kind of directing, directing folks to the questionnaire right now, and would like that feedback captured there. And then when we have some more detailed proposals, detailed options, I think that's when we really want to get into a more robust conversation in the next round of engagement later this fall. But Scott, feel free to jump in there with any clarifications.
Yeah, Daniel, I think that covered it. Ryan, if TAB wants to provide some substantive feedback at this time, we'll accept it and use that in our considerations. But yeah, with the options coming forward in the next round of engagement, I think would probably be the most ideal time for that.
Okay, and before I give the TAB members a chance to tackle that, when do you expect that next one to be, or maybe a range of dates when you come back to TAB for that more deeper substantive feedback?
That will be sometime early to late fall
Okay.
Of this year.
Okay, so maybe some light feedback today and heavier feedback in the fall.
Yep.
Okay. Would anybody like to provide input? Tila.
Thank you, Ryan. And actually, thanks for that question. When should we give feedback and how soon? That was helpful. I did get my postcard, and I did
great.
go on, and I applaud just how clear and how fun to interact with that page was. So first time I've seen the city do something like that. So I thought it was terrific. Really, really appreciated it. And I don't know if the word's gotten out or if it's the postcard, but it's pretty significant, the number of impressions you've had on this. So well done. I mean, I'm very, very impressed with that. I think the only question that raised for me going through all of that information was I wasn't aware that we, like other cities, give cute names to our snow plows. And so there was one that kept showing up in pictures, and I'm forgetting what the name was, but do they all have names, and where can I find out what they are?
We do.
I think,
so we named 10 of the plows. I don't have that list in front of me, but I can share that out to TAB.
Well, it might just be fun if once you complete the survey that you get a special bonus, slide or something, because it's a cute thing to do. People really like it.
I think you were seeing Grateful Sled.
There you go, Grateful Sled. Yeah. And I know that this is not part of the current project, but since you raised it, I did want to encourage us to rethink as a city the changes to the code that leave sort of city streets as the responsibility of the city to pay for and the taxpayers to pay for, and buses, some of them we can pay for and some of them we rely on volunteers. And then the sidewalks, well, we'll spend some enforcement dollars maybe if a neighbor rats you out, but we're not really going to spend much effort or money helping out the lowly pedestrian. I think that this is one example where we spend money exposes our priorities in a way that is not terribly flattering for how we are valuing different users of our public streetscape. So thanks for the work that you've done, and I look forward to better treatment of pedestrians in the future. And I'm hoping that this really is an informative exercise for you to be able to sort of better prioritize where we're spending money. But for the moment, I was just thrilled to learn more about what was going on and what you're thinking about changing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tila, Trini?
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for the presentation. I echo my colleagues, and I just wanted to add, and I mean, I guess this is more like a dream than anything. I mean, I'm seeing that there's a 75% plowing of the bike paths and the multi-use paths. And I mean, is there any way that we could get additional funding or allocate funding so that number goes up to 100, considering the high ridership in our city?
Trini, I'll take that one.
To go over there.
Yeah, I'm not, I guess we probably had that, the 75% of on-street. I think what that excludes is a lot of the neighborhood green streets that are either already implemented or have not yet been implemented and designated as green streets. I think they were on the proposal for that, as well as I think all the on-street painted bike lanes, if I'm not mistaken, Daniel, are currently in our program.
But what about the bike paths? Because I think it was very specific.
So the multi-use paths, we do maintain 100% of the 36 miles that we're responsible for.
Okay. All right. Well, wonderful. Well, thank you.
Yeah, I think Scott's right there. Yeah, 100% of the paths we maintain, and then yeah, the kind of the main area where there are some segments on the on-street network that are not currently plowed are designated bike routes. So they are already implemented neighborhood green streets or proposed neighborhood green streets that are kind of signed designated bike routes on smaller streets that don't have a dedicated bike lane or a protected bike lane or any kind of enhanced facility. So.
Great. You good? Anything else from you, Trini? Okay.
No, I guess just echoing what Tila was saying, just to keep in mind of all users of the road and pedestrians and people with disabilities, and, you know, be mindful of how they're going to get to places if they're in a more residential area, you know, if the neighbor's not a good neighbor and doesn't do what they're supposed to do, you know, but, you know, but that's about it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Becky, anything from you?
No questions or feedback at this time. I'm looking forward to learning more through the course of the project. So thanks.
Okay, I think that leaves me. Tila, is your hand still up, or have you? What? Go ahead.
It's up again. It was up again, but if you want to go first, that's cool.
No, go ahead, please, Tila, jump in.
Okay. Thank you. I guess the other question I had was, what is the plan for follow-up, since we have had so many contacts and views from people, and, you know, 500 or so have submitted questionnaires. I know you didn't have to give your own information for questionnaires, but is there a plan to like continue to keep people in the loop, the ones who did bother to fill out a questionnaire? And in a related vein, I know if 10 of your plows have been named, I count, looking at my postcard, that there's 21 total. And so that maybe leaves an opportunity to ask people for input on, you know, the next cute name. That might be a good way to engage them as we continue on in the process, because we have 11 more we might be able to name. That's all.
Thanks, Tila, for that. I think to your first question, we will be sharing a summary of the engagement received in this round when we come back up to the community, or maybe even predating that through the website. And then that'll be directly informing, you know, what kind of menu of options we're going to be considering for potential program changes. And we did see I think about over a quarter of respondents actually signed up for our new transportation mobility mailing list. And so we'll be sharing updates through that newsletter throughout the life of the project. So that was pretty positive to see people kind of opting into that and wanting to stay informed that way. And then we also had an option, if you noticed, to kind of independent of signing up for the newsletter, just if they consented to be contacted by the project team with any follow-up questions. So we might take people up on that if they're providing, really, a free response comment that we haven't considered. We kind of want to follow up on that and ask some follow-up questions. So that was kind of an element of the questionnaire too, to kind of continue the conversation with folks who are engaging so far.
Terrific, thank you.
And then I'll just jump in and speak to the snowplow naming thing real quick. So the theory behind, or the reason behind only doing 10, we do 2 types of shifts. We do a full shift or a skeleton shift, and we wanted to make sure that the named plows were out all the time. So with a skeleton shift, we generally have about those 10 trucks running. So to make sure that those plows are out on the street and not sitting here parked, we've only named 10. Definitely open to the idea of naming more of those in the future. And then Trini, I saw a comment pop in. We do engage BVSD students grades K through 5. So that's where the snowplow names come from. And then we do selections based on those submissions. So a very, very fun little project that we do with our snowplows.
That's awesome.
Feel like Grateful Sled might have had some parental input potentially.
Very possible.
Yeah.
For 2 years running, we have had a Star Wars theme. So that's been interesting.
Okay, I suppose I'll take a turn then. So I have a few assorted points of feedback. First though, Daniel and Scott, thank you for working on this. TAB started, when I started in spring 2020, I think, this was like on the agenda then, and we've been talking about this for ever since then, and I'm really glad to see it coming together. The chance for the public to provide input on a strategy. And also, I just want to, Scott, say thank you again for having you've hosted trainings in the past, including this past fall, that you invited TAB to come to go drive your equipment and talk to your team and ask you questions. And I took advantage of that in the fall, and I found it incredibly helpful. So I encourage you to, if you have time, to do that again in this coming season, and people can join you. The other thing I wanted to say, maybe just before I provide some more feedback, is I appreciate that winter operations can be really expensive, and especially getting work done when a storm is happening. And there's this sort of trade-off question about, if you say, okay, if we had another $1 million or so, just thought experiment, is that the thing to focus on versus other things that the department might do? And it's an important question. But what it does imply, and I'll move on to maybe a few points of input now, is if you think about an 80-20 approach with what we need to do, at least on the bike side of things, I think there's an interesting distinction, and this might be worth like interrogating or talking with the public about. There's a distinction between the peaky few days where we have big storms and the things that need to happen during the storms and immediately after, which is very time intensive and requires a lot of people at once. And that's a contrast to maybe you could call it a more chronic situation of this long tail of ice, snow that melts and morphs and becomes ice again in certain areas, particularly under underpasses in greenway streets that don't get a lot of sun. And that's different than the immediacy of the storms. And when I think about big picture winter operations, bikes, what feels most important to me is, we have in the summer the mode share of bikes is like gangbusters. But when it is in the dead of the winter, there's like nothing, zero almost, at least on the really cold days. It's not zero. But I just think about how much of this is like, can we create a culture of encouraging people to not put their bikes away for the winter by helping them feel like in general, there's I don't know, a treatment that is being thoughtful about the sort of more chronic conditions. So I guess that's my it's not maybe very articulate, but just a thought I would offer to staff to maybe think about, or at least help the public understand when they're giving input, that there's different phases of winter operations, at least with respect to the storms that we're handling. And my sense is that a lot of the challenges we face are going to be in more of this like 80-20 chronic situation, and it's not going to be as expensive as saying, we have to clear everything right away perfectly when, with respect to a few days of really big storms. So just a thought. And I think I'll just make one other sort of comment for now, and then I'll leave the rest for the fall. And it's just, I'm sort of agreeing with what Tila and I think Trini kind of said, which is that this exercise has been quite a long time coming, and I hope it will be a visioning exercise that will be very meaningful in terms of level of ambition and scope. Because that's, in my recollection, that's kind of what has been the premise of this, is that it's the community is interested in really thinking through how to do this as good as possible. And so, Daniel, one thing I heard you say, I think, was the plan will assume existing resources and staff. And I understand the reasoning for that, but I would suggest that I think it would be good if, you could at least come up with, if you find that, the kind of things people want to talk about are just far beyond what fits existing resources and staff. We have a way to categorize that, to catalog that, and then come back and make a price list if we need to, but at least to make it transparent what we could do given resources, and not avoid some of the bigger picture stuff because we're assuming we not to have resources, because I do think that's in keeping with the spirit of a lot of the discussions that have led to the process getting started. So I think I'll leave it at that, but I'm happy to answer any questions if I clarify anything.
No, that sounds great, Ryan, and I appreciate that feedback about creating some options and expanding what we're looking at, and I think that is really part of this project, and one of the ideas that we're going to at least look into and try to do some development around.
Great.
Yeah,
Okay, great.
thanks, Ryan. I was just going to say, I hope that when we say that things could be deferred to a 2025 budget year request, that's not putting it off to something else. I think, we're going to be considering potential changes of that magnitude, but we just kind of want to be transparent about the timeline for that, and that it wouldn't be anything that could be implemented with an initial implementation this coming winter 2023, 2024. But yeah, thanks, Scott, for clarifying that too, but just kind of want to chime in about that timeline piece and just being transparent about when any bigger changes to service levels could occur if they were pursued and supported.
Thanks, Daniel. Okay. We had a second question. Maybe people have taken that on, but just for good measure, our second question was, does the board have any questions about the engagement activities and feedback received to date? Trini or Becky or Tila? Okay. I think I have one then. Daniel, I think, okay, so you told us about the number of responses you've gotten. Can you just say, what do you know about the respondents? Like what are the factors? Like age? I think you talked about mode share, but what do we know about who's responding?
We haven't dove into there are optional demographic questions that we can drill down a little bit further. So we haven't dove in that level of detail since the the engagement is still open through the end of this week. But that's to come. And I think that engagement summary, we'll be sharing some takeaways, down to that level of detail, and why I did want to highlight the kind of the modal choices of respondents as well. And we have that upfront in the questionnaire to also kind of get at, filtering this data down and trying to distill, areas of improvement for the program or potential changes. So long-winded way of saying, I think we'll get down to that level of detail with a share out of the engagement responses.
Okay, I suppose what I'm getting at is like making sure we're hearing enough from the people that we want to hear from. So
Yeah.
like, and not waiting till the end to figure that out. Did you say the bike? I think the bike, it was like 4% was people that bike.
20% identified as daily bikers. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Daily transit users was the 4%. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. That's it for me then. Thank you, Daniel. Anything else on this? Okay. Daniel, Scott, do you have what you need from us for now?
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, thank you both. And why don't we move on to the next item? Number 5, staff update and tab feedback on the final Vision Zero action plan progress. And I believe Devin is leading this. Devin, can I turn it over to you?
Yes, thank you, Ryan. All right, hopefully folks can see my screen. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Devin Joslin. I'm the principal traffic engineer for the city of Boulder. For the past year, I've been serving as the project manager for the Vision Zero action plan update, and just really excited to be here tonight to discuss with you the draft plan. I'm joined tonight by Charlie Alexander, the consultant project manager from Fair and Peers, who is here to help me answer your questions following this presentation. I just really want to express a word of gratitude before I begin. I want to thank the project team and all those who served on it and worked really hard behind the scenes on the development of this plan. I also want to thank the members of the community and our stakeholder groups for providing feedback along the way. And to you, Tab, as well, for your feedback and input. We're just really eager to hear your thoughts on the draft plan. So I'll dive in now. Just wanted to preface this with, how this new plan is different than the prior plan. We heard a desire that the new plan needs to focus on action and be achievable with anticipated staffing and funding. And this plan is structured to do that. What I really want to highlight here and emphasize is that the new plan includes the components required for the city to pursue a Safe Streets and Roads for All implementation grant. The SS4A grant requires that the plan have a target of 0, involve boards and council, conduct safety analyses to develop a high-risk network, engage robustly with community members and relevant stakeholders, consider equity impacts of proposed projects and strategies, assess current guidelines and policies, prioritize projects and actions, and commit to measuring progress transparently. We're excited that the new plan incorporates all of these elements. Before I talk about the updated action plan, I want to briefly discuss the status of the prior action plan. This was a request from some of our stakeholder groups. The status of prior actions were reviewed in part as a way to identify which actions were most successfully completed, to identify the themes and emphasis areas best suited to carry forward into the updated action plan. The key takeaway here is that this check revealed the actions from the prior plan that staff felt were most important. The actions staff tended not to focus on as much were ones that required a disproportionate amount of effort versus anticipated impact. In this way, the review of the prior plan gave us an idea of where time would be well spent versus not in the updated action plan. Appendix B, which was included in your packet, contains a list of all the actions identified in the prior plan, along with a color-coded status of each. Actions that were green were on track to meeting the target. We had 25 of 50 actions that fell in the level green. Most of the completed actions were focused on installing countermeasures, implementing signal phasing changes, enforcing unsafe travel behaviors, advocating for changes to state legislation, participating in regional Vision Zero meetings to share knowledge, and improving accuracy of crash data and transparency. In the yellow category, we had 12 of 50 actions. Actions that had some progress but not enough to meet the target included things like updates to design standards, refinements to signage at right turn slip lanes, developing a plan for multi-use lighting at underpasses and intersections, bolstering social media engagement, and conducting evaluations to measure effectiveness of Vision Zero treatments. In the red, we had 13 of 50 actions. Most incomplete actions are focused on things like education campaigns, raising awareness of and increasing funding for Vision Zero, and better tracking progress of actions. And then now I'll dive into the new plan, and again, just the reason why we're doing the work that we're doing. Our goal is zero. And while Boulder's annual number of fatal and serious injury crashes is relatively low compared to other communities, it is still too much. What I want to point out here, though, is that our current level of severe crashes does make it a bit challenging in terms of identifying those locations with specific crash patterns. For this reason, we broadened our sample size. We looked at 5 years of crash data in the action plan, looking at data from 2016 through 2020. And we also applied a systemic safety analysis, which I'll talk about on the next few slides. Because our level of crashes makes it difficult to establish location-specific patterns of crashes, we needed to take a systemic approach to crash reduction. Through this project, we've developed a systemic approach for Boulder to reduce fatal and serious injury crashes. This is also an international best practice for safety planning. The systemic approach focuses on common crash types and effective solutions, prioritizing locations with the most risk, and implementing solutions across the system where possible. To focus on common crash types, we found that just 7 types of crashes account for 62% of crashes on the high-risk network. To prioritize locations with the most risk, many of our actions rely on broad implementation. First, across the high-risk network, which has 5 times the risk of Boulder's entire arterial street network as a whole, then on remaining city streets. For this reason, many of the recommended countermeasures are focused where there are high volumes of ped and bike activity. Because the entering volume of vehicles, pedestrians, and bicyclists is a primary driver of exposure and conflicts at a location, we can use entering volumes of those different modes to prioritize different engineering solutions. You've seen the high-risk network before, but we wanted to point out these interesting statistics that reinforce how focusing on this limited number of streets will have an outsized impact on reducing fatal and serious injury crashes. The high-risk network includes streets with 5 or 6 overlapping risk factors according to our systemic safety analysis. The high-risk network includes 7% of city streets, but accounts for 48% of fatal and serious injury crashes, 56% of bicycle crashes, and 57% of pedestrian crashes. We also wanted to reiterate how the high-risk network overlaps with many core arterial network corridors, such as Baseline, Iris, and Folsom. So we hope to implement many of these Vision Zero recommendations through the build-out of core arterial network projects. I also want to reiterate and emphasize here that the many other concurrent work plan items the city has that are also advancing safety. This is things such as the ADA transition plan and the pavement management program mobility enhancements, for example. I also want to point out, as can be seen on the map on the right, that much of our high-risk network also overlaps with DRCOG's high injury network, which is an important tool for allocating regional safety funding. There does remain a gap in funding required to implement many of the higher cost projects that the updated action plan identifies. While the Transportation and Mobility Department has about $250,000 annually toward Vision Zero, the cost of higher projects can be hundreds of thousands of dollars each. These next few slides will walk through the project identification and prioritization process that's outlined in the plan. This slide shows the 7 crash types that account for 62% of severe crashes on the high-risk network. Many of these were identified in the Safe Streets report and confirmed through the additional analyses conducted for the action plan. The common crash types are shown here on the slide, but often do involve our vulnerable roadway users getting hit by people turning left, making right turns, having challenges at multi-use path crossings, and just in general, also getting hit while crossing the street. So here are the engineering solutions that the action plan recommends implementing across the system. In some cases, there are multiple solutions for a given crash type. The plan is focused on action, and that mostly takes the shape of projects. In some cases, actions include updates to either processes, guidelines, or policies, as well as experimentation and evaluation of solutions. Some of the guidelines planned to be reviewed and updated as part of the action plan include the pedestrian crossing treatment installation guidelines and the signal timing practices. The action plan itself is divided into 4 categories, encompassing a total of 20 actions. The first category involves implementing engineering solutions and has the bulk of the actions at 9 actions. The second category involves pairing engineering solutions with education and enforcement and has 6 actions. The next involves improving the city's internal Vision Zero practices and has 2 actions. And the final category involves improving Vision Zero data and transparency and has 3 actions. We wanted to focus a bit more on the engineering solutions since these are likely of greatest interest to TAB, although we certainly welcome your feedback on all aspects of the plan. What I want to point out here first is the top action, which is the broad implementation of several different countermeasures according to the systemic safety approach. And this is things like leading pedestrian intervals, restriction of right turn on red, implementing additional protected left turn phases, green pavement markings, and making improvements to right turn slip lanes. The follow-on to that is that in many cases, we need to update relevant city practices and guidelines to ensure that our systemic implementation of the above treatments is uniform and will most effectively manage risk across the system. The third one down, we do plan to leverage our core arterial network improvements to further address Vision Zero needs along our major arterial corridors. And we recognize that speed management is an important tool citywide. And just a reminder that this year we are updating our speed limit setting and signing practices, and we will be implementing those new policies and practices in the upcoming years. The second to last bullet there acknowledges that in some cases we will be experimenting and evaluating with different solution options where good research on solutions is not available. This is the case for right turn slip lanes, for example. And finally, we've developed an additional set of low and higher cost solutions that are location specific. These solutions are different in type to the systemic treatments, but address safety needs that arose from analysis of the high-risk network corridors. In terms of next steps, I just want to point out again that there are many concurrent projects and programs that all work toward achieving Vision Zero. And as I mentioned, those are things like our core arterial network, the ADA transition plan, and the pavement management program mobility enhancements. So please do keep in mind that all those projects and programs have an eye toward Vision Zero in their implementation and work to improve comfort for all modes and abilities. For the plan itself, though, we are planning to go to City Council early next month to present the plan and ask for endorsement of that plan as a work plan item. And then we're making a commitment as part of the plan to continue to analyze and report on progress in achieving the actions each year. And then the final note here is just a reminder that this is intended to be a 5-year action plan and include actions for the period from 2023 through 2027. So we anticipate that our next update to the plan will not be until 2027. Ryan, I know prior to the meeting, we were kind of talking through some of the logistics, and I didn't chime in at that time, but keep this in mind for the procedure following the presentation here, that really we're requesting TAB to endorse the Vision Zero action plan tonight. And the reason for endorsement rather than a formal motion and recommendation to support adoption of the plan is because the plan is an operational plan to implement goals that TAB and City Council have already adopted in the Transportation Master Plan. When the plan is brought to Council next month, there will not be any Council action requested in terms of a resolution to adopt the plan, but staff will more so be seeking endorsement of the plan as an ongoing work plan item for the Transportation and Mobility Department. So we could certainly present for much longer on the details of the action plan and its development, but we wanted to leave time for your questions and discussion. So thank you very much for your attention during the presentation.
Thank you, Devin. I thought that was a great, clean presentation. I feel many of the things that I would have wondered is all put together right there. So I won't have too much, but just to be clear, what I think you would most use from us is you would like a recommendation. So we'll entertain doing a vote for an endorsement. Maybe we'll have a little bit of discussion and then we'll get to that. So we'll give you that vote. Is that help? Okay. Great.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay, great. TAB colleagues, why don't we do that then? Maybe start if there's any questions for Devin, and then we can do discussion after that. So Trini, you have your hand up. Do you have any questions?
No, well, I just wanted to thank Devin, and it's really exciting to see that the city's requesting funds from the Safe Streets for All grants, and I'm really, really happy to see that. And I guess my only 2 comments regarding the presentation, I never heard any mention of protected bike lanes. And if you could add that, that would be fabulous. I think overall it's really well put together and, really well thought out. And as a cheap solution, I would suggest raised crosswalks. Those have really a really high percentage of success with as far as the communities that have implemented them. I think it's like an 80% pedestrian. So that's all for me, but thank you so much, Devin. And yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Devin, do you want to respond to any of that, or are you happy with?
No, I think that's a good point. I mean, I hope it came through that the core arterial network is certainly a complementary thing to the Vision Zero action plan. And of course, the emphasis of that is to install a lot of those protected bike lanes along our major arterial corridors. So I think that's maybe part of the reason why it wasn't explicitly mentioned within the plan, is it's kind of implicitly understood that as part of the core arterial network, that is a focus area.
Got it. Thanks, Devin. Okay, ideally we do questions now and then we'll come back for comments. Becky, would you like to go?
Yeah, thanks. And one question I have is, in a few different places, the plan talks about proactive analysis to identify what changes will be made, and or if a change would be made to a given intersection or location. And one question I had was, is something being in the I forget the acronym exactly. HRN, what is the R? Sorry, I forget. But for being in that network, is by virtue of being in one of those areas, is that already like reason for it receiving a change in treatment, or is it just a higher candidate and then additional analysis is done? I'm curious. So as just an example, protected left turns and leading pedestrian intervals, those kinds of things. So I'm wondering, like, because say it's an intersection as part of that network, is it already like, is that reason for getting that leading pedestrian interval, or is that just a reason to look at it to consider it for that treatment?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. I think essentially the high-risk network is the first focus of a lot of our work. And some of the work, as I mentioned, will include taking a closer look at those guidelines, thresholds, to determine kind of where and to what extent we will implement those identified solutions. Charlie, I don't know if you've got anything to add on that in terms of your analysis and understanding of the way you structured the plan.
Yeah, that's correct. I'll just maybe offer a different way of describing it, and Becky, different actions in the action plan themselves related to some of those systemic countermeasures that Devin described. The way the action plan describes them is first implement these across the high-risk network, then implement them at other locations. So it is intended that discretion is applied across the system, but in terms of order of implementation, the high-risk network would go first. I do think that a benefit of that high-risk network and some of the numbers that Devin portrayed, like the 5 times as much risk as other arterial streets, is a helpful tool for prioritization for city staff as they go along implementing different projects, and as funding needs beyond what the city's got money for become available. I think projects along the high-risk network can effectively take priority. I mean, there might be other reasons why other locations sort of come in at a higher position or align in position. But so I think it's on one hand a tool for implementation in the near term, but also a tool for implementation in the long term as the city attracts regional, state, federal funding.
Thank you. That's helpful.
So Becky, okay. Tila.
Thanks, Ryan. I think I have 3 questions. Devin, that was your best presentation so far. I think, well done. And as I said in my email earlier, it's great work on this document. I'm wondering if you have any top level explanations about what city staff can and cannot do on basically CDOT highways, because I know sometimes we've had some bright ideas about changing things like speed limits or lane configurations or signals on Broadway or on Iris, but those are also, Highway 119 or Highway 36. Because I was really fascinated by some of the discussion in the proposed changes or things to consider about doing things like removing slip lanes or changing speed limits or light and signal operation changes. So is there a sort of a bright line or some guideline about what we can expect to ask for and to think about doing versus things that are just not on the table because they are kind of CDOT roads?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do think we are fortunate that we do have a really good relationship with CDOT, and it's primarily the Region 4 staff that we work with most often. And I will tell you that CDOT is also in the process, believe it or not, they're ahead of us on something, and that is they're looking at changes to speed limits as well. So we've actually partnered with them on a project to review the speed along portions of South Broadway from baseline to the city limits, kind of using their new speed limit setting methodology. So that is a project that's ongoing now that I think indicates a certain level of change in philosophy from CDOT from ways that they had done work in the past. So I would say that there is probably more of an openness from the team of engineers at CDOT currently than there may have been in the past to these types of changes on the highway system. I don't know, Charlie, if you have any insight into that or anything you're hearing from CDOT on other projects that you're working on.
If there's, I don't know the number of signals in Boulder on the state highway system that are Senate Bill 8, Devin, in terms of local maintenance and control.
Yeah, it's roughly, I think like 70 or so. It is quite a few. It's nearly half of our signal system that falls under the SB 8 agreement.
Okay, and is that 100% of the signals on the state highway system in Boulder?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It does include pretty much all signals on the highway system.
Okay, so sorry, Tila, back and forth there to make sure I answered the question correctly. So Senate Bill 8 basically gives control of the signals within the city of Boulder on the state highway system to the city in terms of, you know, a lot of their operational characteristics and maintenance. And Devin might correct me on some of the specifics of that, but it gives the city a pretty good amount of leverage in terms of decisions about like where left turn lanes, or I'm sorry, how left turn operation is changed, or how right turns are treated, not unilateral per se, but a lot more influence. So typically I would say that where you've got SB 8 signals, you've got a lot of influence for change. Devin mentioned the other side of that related to speed limit setting, which I think is usually the other thing we're often running up against, but it's exciting to see some change in those areas as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's really interesting. My second question has to relate to kind of the 6 or 7 factors that went into identifying the high risk network. Table 1, I guess, on page 28 of the draft, just has a big table of systemic safety analysis factors, and then 7 of them are highlighted in green, and I'm not really given any further information about why this is. And 2 of them seem mutually exclusive, whether it's a signal or major unsignalized intersection, for instance. So I'm like, well, would any of them be 6 out of 6? Maybe you're talking about a larger section than just an intersection. But in particular, what I'm worried about and concerned about is that multi-use path is just sort of thrown in there. And if you overlaid our multi-use path network map with the high risk network map, there would be almost no overlap. And I think maybe what we're talking about is intersections of multi-use paths with some of these arterial streets, but it's not just that there's a multi-use path there, because they just don't line up. And if you look at the high risk network map, it doesn't really align with where our multi-use paths are. And so and the third part of that worries me is I would hate to say that our multi-use paths, which are designed to be and generally do serve as a very comfortable, safe network of things for people to ride on, I would hate to name them as a problem, and in fact a risk factor for pedestrian and bicycle injuries. So I'm guessing, and I didn't really spend too much effort trying to parse out why and where and how and what the multi-use component was on the high risk bit. I'm guessing that it was included as a high risk factor because it's probably due to driver inattention or unawareness or not being able to see multi-use path user until they intersect with the roadways. But it's not the fact that it's a multi-use path. It does happen to involve multi-use path users, but that is not a correct statement of the problem, I think. I just wanted to check you on that. But that is pretty worrisome to me that it's included and not really explained anywhere in the document. And I think it's probably misdescribed. So can you shed any light on that?
Charlie, I don't know if that's a better one for you. I know we did include Tila. Hopefully you got all the appendices. I know it was a ton of material, but one of the appendices did speak specifically more in depth to the development of the risk factors and kind of gave a little more insight into the methodology of how Fair and Peers arrived at those recommendations.
Yeah, Devin, I think that's Appendix A. I'll check at the end, Tila, and try to address your question first. So, I guess what I would offer is that the systemic safety analysis isn't attempting to sort of arbitrate what's right or wrong in terms of risk factors. It's really trying to understand where there is correlation between something in the built environment and crashes that happen, particularly fatal and serious injury crashes. So that's really all it's looking for is there a correlation between these two things or not? To that point, there's not necessarily the intended interpretation of something showing up as a risk factor is not that the solution to that is the opposite, right? So in some cases, that maybe is intuitive where the higher speed corridors, right? So that shows up as a risk factor. Obviously, if we can lower the speeds on the corridors, that sort of mitigates the risk factor and sort of achieves the end game. But the intent of multi-use paths and including them as a risk factor is not to suggest that removing multi-use paths is the solution. That's absolutely not what we're intending to say through this. But what we did find, and the appendix that talks through this looks through exploring that mathematical relationship between these risk factors and fatal and serious injury crashes, and then the spatial relationship as well, is that you do have a fair number of crashes that occur sort of for the reasons that you described, where there are crashes between a driver in a vehicle and a bicyclist, or in some cases a pedestrian on a multi-use path. Streets like 28th, portions of Arapahoe, portions of Table Mesa. I'm trying to think of some of the others in the portions of Broadway that have those multi-use paths all show up on the high-risk network. So the intent of identifying those as high-risk network streets is then to ask the question, okay, if that is an underlying issue, what are the solutions to that? Not to suggest that they be removed, and that's where those 7 different crash types sort of come into the fold of aiming to mitigate the risk associated with the presence of that risk factor.
Okay. Are you saying then that the 7 risk factors and the 7 crash types are like they match up? Because it didn't strike me as that, but it might. I did note it was 7 and 7, but it didn't seem to be like a perfect fit. So,
6 and 7, yeah, six
and 7,
risk
yeah,
factors, and then 7 crash
Okay.
types. So yeah, I mean, I guess what I would say is that the sort of separate analyses, the 6 risk factors were really generally, that analysis was going to say, where's the most risk across the system? And Devin, iterated the point of 5 times as much risk on these streets, right? And then, really we poured through every single one of those corridors and all the crashes that had happened that 5-year period to identify those 7 crash types. And, sure enough, one of those 7 relates to crashes on multi-use paths. And then we've got the associated countermeasures. Does that make sense?
And specifically on multi-use paths at intersections with streets and driveways.
Yeah,
So,
driveways
again,
and minor streets.
It's not
exactly.
it's not the path.
Exactly.
Sort of the entrance and exits to the paths, the path gateways. And just to belabor the point perhaps a bit, it's not, again, not the risk factor isn't the multi-use path, but that there are vulnerable users concentrated on those multi-use paths. And we know that the vulnerable users are much more and disproportionately likely to be killed or seriously injured in a collision with a motor vehicle, right? And so it's not the multi-use path problem, it's the vulnerable user versus the 8,000-pound car problem. So if and for the sake, like I read this stuff, and yeah, I did not read the, page 56 with all crashes in that huge box, and I can't even blow it up big enough to see the damn thing. But the green and orange and yellow and red, huge chart, I hats off on all the analysis, but not everyone's going to be like me and read it through all the nitty-gritty details. And so to the extent that a casual reader will pick it up and say, oh, multi-use paths are a risk factor, I'm going to avoid those or whatever. We need to do our best to avoid that impression at all costs on this, achieving Vision Zero and adopting this action plan. We don't want to be suggesting anything is wrong. So I hear your fine tuning, and I get you, and I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying the impression that we're leaving with the vast majority of our audience might not get to your nuanced expression of the problem. And I had my third question was actually kind of taking advantage of Bill Cowan being here. And so I don't know if he's actually listening because this isn't his part right now, but in one of the slip lane possible mitigations, we talked about removing the slip lane or adding signage, yield signage or PED signage. And I know that during Bill Cowan's tenure as director, I don't think anyone who was working on that with him is still here at the city, but they did experiment a little bit with using different signage to alert motorists to crossers of multi-use path users on the slip lanes. And I don't recall if the results of any of that analysis yielded anything or if they got reported to TAB. So if Bill is on and listening, I'm curious if he can shed any light on whether we learned anything from that would inform the mitigations that we're considering now in this Vision Zero action plan.
I am on. I am listening. Is that something you'd like me to address, Devin?
Yes, yeah, if you have that on your memory and can shoot from the hip on it, sure, go ahead.
I'll endeavor to do so. Bill Cowan with the Fox Tuttle Transportation Group, former City of Boulder employee. Yes, at the time that we developed, I think the last Safe Streets Boulder report, there had been several locations where we had put the state law yield to pedestrian signs in place at the crosswalks of the right turn bypass islands, basically acknowledging that those were crosswalks. They should be signed as crosswalks. They should have the signs that tell drivers what to do. Whereas sort of a standard approach would be to not have any signing there and to just have like a yield sign. My understanding is that, and these would be results that were in the prior Safe Streets Boulder report and should be able to be found, is that they were successful in lowering crashes at least some of the locations where that was implemented. And there was going to be consideration of that being a standard approach. I also know that there have since been some challenges with using those state law signs on state highways. So I don't know if that has influenced their use as well. That's what I recall.
Thank you, Bill. Thanks for putting up with me on that. You're looking well. Good to see you.
And I can add on to that just a little bit. So you probably saw that one of the actions is to get consistent signs and markings at slip lanes. So essentially that is saying we would do another kind of audit of the signs and markings at slip lanes and just make sure that they are consistent across the system, that, you know, there might still be a location like Bill said where we have, you know, obviously all of these have crosswalks across them, but they might not all be signed with the state law yield signs or other PED warning signs. And we would look to potentially make that change at those locations that don't have those signs. The other consideration is the way the yield condition functions. If it goes into a kind of dedicated lane that gives motorists room to merge, or if it just is basically a forced yield condition where the lane goes into the through lane directly without giving kind of a merge lane for motorists. And that kind of dictates where the yield sign goes, whether it goes like before the crosswalk or after the crosswalk, but just taking a consistent look at that across the system. And then to Bill's last point, that is one thing where CDOT did challenge us, I think it was in 2021, on the state law yield signs that we had at the crossing locations for slip lanes on the state highways. And our answer to that was to just install the standard yellow diamond warning sign that has the ped and bike symbols on it with the downward arrows in those locations. So there are a few locations where if you come across a slip lane and it's on a state highway, you will see the diamond shaped pedestrian warning sign. And if it's at another location that's a Boulder street, you would most likely see the Boulder state law yield sign.
Okay, Thank you, Devin. Thank you, Bill. Tila, anything else from your side? Okay. I have two questions. Devin, the first is about the crash analysis, and I don't want to put you on the spot, so the answer might well be you need to think about it. But I'm just curious about crash analysis and crash factors in terms of months of the year or seasons of the year or time of day or weather conditions. I didn't see much about that in your presentation or the slides, and I'm just the snow and ice presentation got me thinking about this aspect of I guess partly is there any implication of this plan for snow and ice, but I guess just more generally, is there any, I don't know, any analysis been done on time of year, time of day, weather conditions as far as major contributing factors?
I can start, Charlie, and then you can add on. So I'll point out, Ryan, that as part of the project, we did some specific intersection crash analysis that was based on highway safety manual methodology. And that looks at what they call safety performance functions. And then in addition to that, we did what's called direct diagnostics. And it's a way of determining whether a particular crash type at an intersection is overrepresented compared to similar intersections. And I think through that analysis, that is intended to capture, for example, whether snow and ice related crashes are occurring at a frequency higher than expected at a particular intersection. So to the extent that we looked at 35 intersections, I don't think we saw really any trends or things that would say that seasonality or weather played an impact. Now, I will say with respect to time of day, that is something we look at very closely when we're considering how we implement our left turn phasing changes, because recognizing that, if a left turn crash occurs on a Saturday morning, that may be occurring under a different set of circumstances than if it occurs during the weekday rush hour, for example. So that is very much a consideration in terms of our left turn phasing. Charlie, anything to add on to that from your analysis work?
I would just offer something that we looked into. I worked on the regional Vision Zero action plan for DRCOG, and this is a couple of years ago, Ryan, but we explored some hypotheses related to the role of weather in fatal and severe crashes, and sort of found the opposite maybe of what you would intuitively expect. You'd sort of think snow and ice on the ground, we're going to see more fatalities, serious injuries. And generally, a couple things that we found. One is that the number of days in a typical year in Colorado's climate where that is a contributing factor just sort of lends itself, downwards. I'm from upstate New York, the snow stays on the ground once it falls for 5 months, right? So that time period is longer versus the snow and melt that we've got here. The other thing that we found was that while total crashes tend to go up because you get more fender benders, serious and fatals actually tend to go down proportionally because you have a lot more people staying at home and you also have people driving at a slower rate. So that's what we found on a regional scale. We didn't look through this effort whether or not that was repeated or different in Boulder, but that's the only thing I've got additive to what Devin provided.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is on the presentation deck, I think it's slide 7. There's a map of the overlay of the CAN and HRN. I just noticed, I look at IRIS and it feels more truncated than what I expected to see for a representation of CAN. I wonder if I'm maybe not reading out of this what I should, but I guess my question is, if you have the map in front of you, is that horizontal blue line intended to be a representation of, oh, you got it there, of all of what we're doing with CAN and IRIS, or not?
No, it is not. The CAN IRIS project, the western limit is the west end of IRIS, which is the Broadway intersection. So it's the portion that is not technically considered part of the high-risk network that goes from Broadway to, I guess, 19th Street is included in the core arterial network project for IRIS.
Okay, great. So yeah, this is just the overlay of the two and nothing further. Okay, thanks for clarifying. That's all I have.
Ryan, can I jump in, Ryan? I had a
Yes.
similar question on these. Like this slide that you're showing now is the same as figures 10 and 11 on page 32 and 33 of the draft report. And I'm just not clear what they're supposed to be showing. Because it seems like we're supposed to be seeing HIN and HRN, but the right hand, the table 11 just uses HRN. Oh no, it doesn't. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be learning from these two graphs, and
Yeah,
Ryan was
yeah.
confused as well. So,
I can try to explain that again.
well, I don't necessarily need to have it explained to me at the moment. I'm just thinking about who's going to read this and look at it, and what are they going to
Sure.
get from it. So just consider whether we need to, because if you're confusing me and Ryan, you're going to be confusing a whole lot of people.
Sure.
Yeah, that's all. Thank you. Sorry, Ryan. Go ahead.
So for me, Devin, did you want to, were you, anything? You don't need to, but did you want to?
Yeah, I mean, we can definitely take a look at ways to maybe make that more clear. Essentially, it's trying to show on the left that the high-risk network is broader than the core arterial network. The high-risk network includes other arterial street network or other streets besides the core arterial network. So that's kind of the takeaway there, if you will. And then I think on the right, it maybe does get a little bit more confusing because DRCOG has what they call critical corridors and high injury network corridors. But I think there, because you're seeing a lot more of the blue than the red color, it's showing that there is a very strong correlation of our high risk network to what DRCOG had already identified as their high injury or critical corridors.
Okay.
So just to add to that, I would assume that because these areas that are not included in CAN, they will be prioritized, which is actually like a good thing because they will be fixed and hopefully eliminated from the high risk network. Correct?
That's probably one way to think about it. I think. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at 30th Street, for example, and that is, I mean, it's shown as a core arterial network segment, a high risk network segment, and then it is on a DRCOG critical corridor. So it is a corridor that is of, very high regional importance that would lend itself to getting funding for a core arterial network type level of project.
Great.
Okay, I think we've gone through each of the tab members' questions, and we've also heard some feedback. Perhaps can I suggest we would we need to get to the question of do we have a majority to vote on this to endorse? But before we do that, is there any other discussion folks want to have among tab or any other input for staff? I don't have any. Becky, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I didn't say before, so I just want to say that, yeah, I think this is a really great document. I'm really excited about this Vision Zero action plan. I love the improvements over the past version. And it's just, I can really see, through this plan, like the link between actions and goals and activities. It just, so it's really great. And of course, I know that this work has already started in many forms and like with the Vision Zero data dashboard, which was also a really great project that's been super useful. So so just all around really excited about this work. So thanks to everyone who's been involved with it. I also like the balance of, this is what we can do shorter for less money, and this is what will take more resources than what we have right now or more time. It's really helpful, and I think will help as we kind of work through these things over the years, like knowing that we can kind of refer back to this plan and kind of understand where they fit in the bigger picture. And I also found it really helpful that, as I had questions while I was reading it, they were answered in the course of the document. So yeah, so just overall, really excited about it. You said a couple other things which are kind of questions, but not questions to be answered tonight, about this plan, but sort of bigger picture, sort of thinking about, you know, how to help make this plan as successful as it can possibly be. One thing I was interested in was the third of the 4 action types, the improve the city's internal Vision Zero practices, and specifically for all capital projects, designate a transportation and mobility representative to champion Vision Zero goals and strategies. And I was curious, thinking about many projects where there's overlap with other parts of the city, other departments, other actors. And, you know, is there a way to encourage that also within other departments that are interacting? Because they have, you know, I guess where I'm coming from is that in some projects I've seen over the course of my time on TAB since last year, is that sometimes limitations come from not having purview that somebody else, some other department has over a certain part of transportation effectively, or something that affects transportation very closely. And knowing that there's not just a representative to champion Vision Zero goals from transportation, but also from planning or community vitality or you know, at times council, or, you know, I feel like that to me seems like a important ingredient to this being successful, is like making sure that other departments are also prioritizing this as something they are a part of. So there's not really a question there, I guess, but it's something I'm interested in is, you know, is there a way to work towards that, or at least make other departments make sure they're aware of this plan and like supporting it as much as possible. I don't.
Yeah, that's
No.
really good feedback. And Natalie, I saw you popped on. I don't know if you have anything.
Yeah,
to say
I was
there.
just gonna say, I appreciate that feedback and just perspective, and certainly we're thinking about it citywide too. How do we, you know, make sure that as an entire organization, the kind of goals of the departments are being lifted up, and then we're able to kind of have those conversations across departments on those multi-led type of efforts. I think we have a few on the top of our mind, right, recently where that's been the case. So yeah, I appreciate that point. And I think Nuri is definitely thinking about it, and the director team is thinking about it. So we'll continue to just talk about that and think about how we can lift up the work that's important to the departments for the whole city organization.
Thanks. And if there's anything, you know, we can do as TAB to help with that, please let us know. Yes, I had one other a similar vein kind of, but and again, not something to be answered right now, or that I would expect to be answered in this plan, but if there are other bigger picture policies or changes, for instance, that could come from council that would make this work easier. I understand funding is always gonna, you know, is a part of that, you know, just resources to execute. But in addition to that, you know, I'm just interested in, as we think ahead, like, are there things that TAB could help support or advocate for that would help make the plan, you know, make executing this plan either easier or cheaper or faster, or, you know, any, or more efficient, or any of the above. So I just, you know, hope we think about that as we move forward, and so that we can understand how we can be helpful in pushing those things ahead. Yeah, so yeah, no, not really a question there, just another comment. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, one thing, just a quick point. So I will point out that there is, I don't think it's quite a draft bill yet, but one thing that Carl Castillo and the city have closely been tracking is there are proposed changes to the photo, I'll just call it the photo enforcement bill. And so that is one thing that, you know, TAB and council, you know, you could potentially sort of lobby and get behind that, making those changes, because that would give us more flexibility in how we operate the photo radar ban and conduct photo enforcement in the city.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Great feedback. Thank you.
Okay, Becky, anything else from you? Okay,
Can I
Tila?
just jump? I'm sorry, Tila, before you say something, because I'm gonna forget, just really, really quick about the van. How do you determine where the van is placed? Is it like just rotated in different neighborhoods, cyclically, or I mean, is there? I'm just really curious about that because I feel that we've had a lot of incidents in near Fairview High School. And I think that would be really helpful if we could just place it there, but I don't know what the protocol is.
Sure, I can certainly make that request to PD. We do keep metrics on all the locations where the van is deployed. So that does come into play sometimes as far as locations that do have a higher violation rate, I would say often get the van more than other locations that don't have the higher violation rate, just by virtue of kind of the way that works. And then, of course, there are the limitations of the current state law, and that somewhat limits us too as to where we can put it. So, but I can make that request to PD and keep in mind the need to put the van near schools.
Thank you so much, Devin, and I'm sorry, Tila, for jumping in.
Tila?
No problem, Trini. Thank you. Almost all of my notes have a check mark next to them, so I just have a few more comments and suggestions, and then one question. I thought the glossary at the front was really super helpful, and I'm going to get a little bit into the weeds because this is the first time and probably last time before it gets, given to council that I've actually seen it in this kind of detail. I was confused because we described in the glossary a vertically separated bike lane, and reading that definition, it actually sounds more like an example of one physically protected bike lane, but we don't define protected bike lane or physically protected bike lane anywhere. And so I would really, to me, a vertically separated bike lane means the kind of thing that we tried to do on North Broadway, where the bike lane itself is separated vertically. And you're talking about a vertical separation in the buffer area, at least is the way the definition is written. So I think we can do a little bit better on our description of what protected bike infrastructure looks like without just calling it a vertically separated bike lane. Happy to work with you offline on that if you'd like any further help on that. Thank you for numbering the action plan items. It just was so hard to use the last action plan and refer to things. And now that you've numbered and sub-numbered them, it's going to make things a lot easier when we're trying to communicate with each other and with the public about it. I'm not sure that the responsible party column in the action plan is terribly useful because most I think it's probably a holdover from the last one, and most of them are transportation and mobility, and sometimes it's just transportation, and even I don't know what the difference is there. And obviously, if we're talking about enforcement, obviously PD is going to be a partner. So I think it might make it look cleaner and easier to read and shorten it a bit if we don't include that column. And then finally, on the action plan chapter, it comes way at the end. And I understand we're describing sort of where we were, where we are, what our priorities are, how we built it. We're kind of going chronologically. At the very least, I would have some executive summary, maybe without all the subpoints, but some chart graphic, something quick and really close to the front, maybe before the current chapter 3, that describes what we're proposing. And then when people want more, and say to see page 54 for more detailed description of these items. But you're taking too long to get to the punchline on this action plan because it's all the way down chapter 5 or something. So consider putting it up front or an executive summary or moving it up earlier. Check mark, check mark, check mark. Okay. The last thing I wanted to raise with you, it hasn't happened yet, or in my email earlier, on the multi-use path crash page. And I don't have a page number, but when we're talking about the different crash types, multi-use path crashes is one of them. And I should probably look at what I'm looking at. So there were the 2 flavors of multi-use path crashes were basically a driver turning left from a major street, crossing the multi-use path, entering what would maybe be a minor street. It's not clear what they're crossing, but they're crossing a multi-use path during a left turn off of a major street. And then the other kind of multi-use path crash that came up as one of the common crashes, and this was something we're trying to avoid, is someone on a minor street or crossing a multi-use path and entering a major street, turning right, and looking for traffic on the left and not noticing someone on the multi-use path coming toward them, or not noticing quickly enough that they're crossing multi-use path. And sometimes that's not having enough storage space for a driver who's crossed a multi-use path to then assess oncoming traffic. And that was one of the mitigations that you had suggested. So I guess what I'm asking is, because both of those kinds of multi-use path crash problems types are precisely what Community Cycles has been raising again and again about the Broadway and Grandview proposed intersection crossing the multi-use path at the University Hill Convention Complex right now that's under construction. Those are the two things that they've pointed out are huge problems, and we would expect them to be of greater concern because with this construction, we're inviting, I forget what the number is, maybe 11 times more, maybe more than that, of motor vehicles crossing that path. So my question is, which of the mitigations that you have described here in this action plan should we expect to see at Broadway and Grandview?
Natalie, feel free to jump on here if you'd like. So I would say, Tila, there has been some development on that front. CU hired Tool Design to do an independent review, and I believe that report has been released as of Friday. And there are a number of recommendations in that report as far as
It has not been released.
Okay, so I misspoke there, but
glad you've seen it.
so I have seen the report, and we'll just say there are additional mitigations that are recommended. I don't know, Natalie, if you've got anything else to add.
Yeah, so there are, and we're definitely looking at the feasibility of those. And CU will be preparing some information to publicly release that document here in the next probably week or two.
Okay. I guess that leads me to a small follow-up question, which is, given that this is an action plan that we're implementing and not like asking to be endorsed or specifically adopted by City Council, but it's already part of an ongoing transportation master plan effort, what kind of teeth would new tools, like say removing right turn slip lanes that we haven't talked about before and that aren't in the transportation master plan, but are in this action plan, what kind of enforceability and sort of power do we derive and give to city staff to sort of implement these procedures without having to sort of reinvent the engagement wheel if it's in this Vision Zero action plan?
That's a good question. My understanding is, I think as we've tried to explain with the right turn slip lanes, is that is an area that doesn't necessarily have very clear national guidance or extensive research. So I don't mean to be cagey, but I think that is one particular thing that we're saying we would take sort of a crawl, walk, run, sprint type approach to where we're saying, I think with this plan, we want to crawl and explore it a little bit before we sprint and go and change every right turn slip lane in the city.
Okay. Well, maybe I used a bad example because I was trying to not re-raise Grandview and Broadway, but I was really thinking of Grandview and Broadway. If we say, when we see this potential for these crashes, multi-use path crashes of these two varieties, and both of them exist at this intersection that's being worked on right now, does this action plan give the city leverage to enforce a safer design that is encompassed in the Vision Zero action plan, say adding extra vehicle storage space for between crossing the multi-use path and entering the roadway? Are we going to be able to do that with this action plan, if that's something that the city decides is necessary to protect users of that multi-use path at that location?
I don't know that it is tied directly to this plan, but I would say keep in mind that there is in process the DCS 2.03Q update, and that will be coming your way, I believe, in May. So as part of that, it is looking at ways to better address these situations that we've come across on certain projects like this.
Thanks, Devin. That's all my questions, Ryan.
Okay, I think, Trini, did you have anything else as far as discussion or feedback before we move to a vote?
I would just say that what Tila is saying is right on point. I mean, it's better to create something that is good from the get-go and create a solution rather than to have to come back and fix it. So, yeah, that's my only additional feedback.
Okay, and I said I don't really have anything. I feel pretty satisfied. I agree with what I've heard from my TAB colleagues. I feel pretty satisfied with what I'm seeing. And Devin, I remember in some of your early days when you started. I recall a discussion with, I forgot if it's 5 E's or how many E's there are, but I think I had made a comment. Gosh, I wish that engineering E would be a lot more prominent, and I see that here. I think that's. Whether it's coincidence or whether you listened, I'm glad to see that, and I think that's really great. So I don't know if we should do a straw poll first, or this is more straightforward than that. Maybe a straw poll, like raise your hand. Are you ready to endorse this? Happy to. Okay, great. Maybe before I sort of do it officially, if I could ask maybe Tila for advice from the trenches, like should we do a vote with any caveats, like we endorse this along with the input we provided, or just?
No, so because we didn't have a public hearing on this item, we can't actually take formal action, meaning like a resolution. And so I think just getting the general endorsement of TAB is probably the best we can do.
Okay. Then I would like to entertain a motion to recommend that TAB endorse this plan. Anybody want to make the motion?
I second the motion.
Okay, Trini, I know it. Good. Okay. I've made the motion. 3 seconds. Okay. All in favor? All right. Four out of our 4 here. So thank you, Devin and team. Great work.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the feedback.
Okay. So let me just orient here. Okay, we're on to item 6, matters, starting with matters.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Please.
I think we have another agenda item, which was the update about the ramp, or is that not happening? Because the agenda that I looked at this morning had ramp, and that's why Bill Cowan's here.
It is.
Right, I had that as a sub bullet under matters from staff. Perhaps that got
Okay.
moved to a higher item. In any case, that was the next item.
Okay, thank you. I just didn't think it was under matters. Thank you.
Natalie, did you want to correct?
Oh, I was just going to help introduce it. Samantha from Community Vitality is here to provide the update on the ramp item, and it's under matters this month as it's just a briefing for you, and they'll be coming back, and Samantha will be talking about that for additional input. Thanks, Samantha. Go ahead.
Thanks, Natalie. Good evening, board members. Thanks for having me back tonight. My name's Samantha, as you've heard, from Community Vitality. If you'll recall, the last time I presented at TAB, we spoke about performance-based pricing, which we are implementing in a few short weeks here, and about RAMP, which is what we're speaking to you about tonight. We've identified new areas of interest, including the East Aurora neighborhood, which has met all criteria and is ready for the next steps. To determine a systematic and data-driven approach to propose regulations for non-permit parking and permitted zones, we've engaged with Bill Cowan of Fox Tuttle to lead this work, who has a presentation. So Bill, thank you.
Thanks, Samantha. Again, Bill Cowan with the Fox Tuttle Transportation Group. Thanks for having us this evening. See if my share screen works. Are you folks seeing that?
There you go. Now I'm seeing it in presentation mode.
Great. So as Samantha mentioned, we are here to talk tonight about the Residential Access Management Program, or RAMP, and particularly a second phase of this policy work. As part of the AMPS implementation, the City of Boulder developed an analysis tool which can be used to identify residential blocks which have characteristics suggesting they might benefit from Residential Access Management Plan, or RAMP, mitigation. This analysis tool was developed last year, reviewed by city policymakers in the fall, I believe, including yourselves. And since that time, Community Vitality has undertaken an evaluation of over 1,000 block faces to determine where potential RAMP mitigation would be potentially beneficial. This includes a potential expansion to the East Aurora NPP zone. In doing so, Community Vitality also identified some additional kind of deeper policy questions that weren't identified and dealt with in the first policy document. And they've asked us to help them in coming up with some recommendations for that. Things having to do with the neighborhood permit parking program and RAMP fall to the purview of TAB. And as we're just starting this work effort now, we wanted to get in front of TAB and get any initial feedback before we began. And this basically just describes what I just said. We have 2 policy questions about implementation that we'd like to talk with you about this evening. The first is, when new blocks have been identified, a new zone or an expansion, how is it determined if additional blocks should be added to the zone? Do the blocks need to be petitioned to be included? And there is some guidance around this in the NPP zone regulations. There's a being directly continuous to qualifying blocks, 60% occupancy for at least 3 hours, 25% of parking occupied by non-residents. I mean, those things are in the regulations and would be pertinent, but it's also historically been the practice that new blocks were only added to the NPP if they petitioned to be included, and that is unclear now in the policy. So we're very interested in clarifying that and getting TAB's feedback on that question. Just as an example, this is the East Aurora network. In this case, all of these blocks shown did petition to be in the program, but if you could imagine for a second that they didn't, and that maybe only 1 or 2 of these blocks had petitioned to be in the program, decisions would have to be made about whether only those blocks were included, or if additional blocks that met certain criteria might be included as well. And would that be only if they petitioned or not? Then the second question, how will the city determine how non-permit parking shall be regulated within the new zones? And there is some language in the NPP zone regulations, includes language allowing for paid parking to be implemented in an NPP, requiring payment for parking during enforced hours, except for permit holders. Additional language about considerations for nighttime and weekend restrictions, and additional availability of alternative parking, transit, and other multimodal service as factors to consider. The most neighborhood permit parking zones currently have only a time restriction upon them. The Chautauqua Access Management Plan is the city's first foray into mixing a charge for parking and a neighborhood permit zone. And I think there's consideration of whether when that should be used in new or expanded NPP situations as well. And these are the RAMP strategies. You've probably seen this slide before. Different ways in which these could potentially be managed, with time limits, with paid parking, with time limits and paid parking, nighttime restrictions, seasonal restrictions, weekends and seasonal restrictions. And then these key metrics are fundamental to the residential access management program, the ramp. Parking occupancy, visitation versus resident parking, zoning, this idea of barriers to pedestrian movement, the resident petition, and the other considerations like cost, proximity, convenience to nearby parking, transit options, impacts to other adjacent neighborhoods. These are all things that we offer as potential considerations. And I can bounce back and forth between these slides if they're necessary when you're providing feedback. So again, this is just the initial discussion of this topic, and we just want to get your initial feedback on these two items before we begin. And these are the two questions.
Thank you, Bill. Tab colleagues, who would like to jump in? Becky.
Yeah, thanks. So just to make sure I'm clear, for question one, it's about it. It's not like we're not talking about the other. We're only talking about petitioning as and whether the degree to which petitioning should be used, not the degree to which the other things like there are other things that are already used as a standard for determining this, right?
That's correct, that are included in the regulations.
Okay, so it's only the petitioning. The question is if petitioning is then a
Well,
requirement.
petitioning's in the regulation too. So I share Becky's question, like what exactly are you asking for in question one?
Yeah,
So-
if I might, Bill.
Yep.
There are some areas where like certain blocks might petition, but then we might study blocks adjacent to the ones that petitioned as well to see whether there's spillover. So it's, there's already been a petition for a specific area, but do we include additional blocks that might benefit from ramp, even though they didn't submit a petition?
I really think that this is in response to this sort of age-old issue of the neighborhood permit parking program, where you go in and you put in a block, and then the parking moves to the next block, and then you put in a block, and it moves to the next block, and so forth. And right, historically, the program had been set up that that was the only way that it could be done. The new regulations allow for that to be different, but should it be different?
Bill, I have a question. It's Tila. Related to what you just said about whether other blocks are included when one block petitions. So, I'm most familiar with the Mapleton Hill NPP, and I know it's gotten expanded a couple of times by petition from people living on Pine Street. And when those additional blocks got added, it was at least two different phases where they got added on. The side streets between Pine and Spruce and Pine and Highland on the numbered streets got added in, even though those households didn't have anything in the petition. In fact, on one of those blocks, there is no household. So it's not entirely the case that it's the only way that they've gotten in the past. Somehow these things have been added in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe what you're here for today is to seek clarity on, when that should happen and not happen, but it has happened in the past. So again, I'm a little confused
Yeah.
what we're asking, what kind of feedback you're asking.
Yeah. So we are seeking clarity on that exact issue. On the first question.
We're doing questions and feedback now, right, Ryan?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't clarify. Why don't we do questions? I guess let's ask questions. Do you have any more questions, Becky, at this point?
No, I don't.
Okay, Tila, do you have questions?
I do, yes. And my main question is on question one in particular, why are we only asking about expanding zones? Because I know an important part of a previous discussion was assessing whether the NPP is performing as it is, or you know, as intended, because you guys used the word spillover, which I think Community Vitality has been careful to not use for a couple of years. But it's basically standing for the idea that the NPP zone itself is causing parking problems in other areas that don't otherwise have a parking demand generator. And I think a critical question is whether the expansions earlier have been excessive and whether they were overcompensating or over treating a problem. So is there any, do we need to be asking you to consider that as part of this issue? Is that going to be something else you're looking at? Have you been instructed not to look at maybe reducing the size or certain blocks, for instance, one where there are no households? Or is that kind of not what you're here for?
So I'll ask Samantha to chime in if I misspeak at all. We've only been tasked with looking at these two questions. My understanding in reading the regulations is that there are very specific regulations already associated with removing zones. So if somebody wanted to pursue removing a zone, they could.
That's true, by petition. That's the only way.
Well, actually, the new regulations allow us to remove a zone if it's underperforming after 3 years. So there is still that element of it as well. And I think if we're examining a zone, there's an opportunity to examine the zone's boundaries as they are as well, and seeing what changes have to be made. But tonight, the question is for new zones or expansions of existing zones where we're adding an NPP. Should we consider blocks that did not petition?
Celia, I think you're on mute. I don't know if you're talking.
Yeah, no, I'm just kind of talking to myself because I'm on the question and I'm wondering if I have questions about question two. And I just don't know whether there are flavors of things to that you've already decided are relevant things if you're determining how non-permit parking gets regulated within a new zone. Was that the list of like management possibilities, Bill, that you had up? Are those what we're trying to vote between?
Let me flash back to that real quick. I
Cool,
think
thank
what
you.
you're talking about is this slide.
Yes. So is this the menu of options we're being asked to consider? Or are you open to us adding menu items, I guess, with respect to number two?
I'm gonna answer and then I'm gonna say again, Samantha, weigh in if I misspeak, but I think that we are open to any feedback that would pertain to how decisions are made about managing the administration or restrictions of non-permit parking. We'll take your feedback.
Well put. Thank you.
Okay, any more questions, Tila? Trini, any questions from you? I don't see your, oh, there you are. Any questions from you? Okay. I have one question, and Samantha, this is a remedial question that I wasn't able to answer on the Google search here. I know you come before us and shared ramp, so apologies if I should remember this, but is there a way to just summarize the goals or the mission of ramp? Like what is the problem that ramp's trying to solve, or just like some high level way to explain, like what is ramp, like before we get to these questions, what is ramp trying to do? What does a successful ramp look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. Ramp, the intention behind ramp is to take a data-driven and equitable approach to managing parking within neighborhoods in the city. Whereas before, the approach was very much based on the petition of a neighborhood or loud voice. We want to use parking occupancy data and other sources of data to help inform where we should be managing parking. Where are the where are the problem areas and where do we need to be mitigating things like parking spillover from high trip generating destinations.
Okay, I heard data driven and equity. And then the only problem I heard was parking spillover. So maybe that is the point, but substantively, like, what are the so the problems are, is it just a propagation of too many cars looking for spaces to park on the streets, and that's just sort of the point? Or is there, I don't know, more to the substance of I guess the goals of the, I mean, I understand that we want to be data driven and equitable, but as far as like the actual reason for it to exist, I hear parking spillover. Are there other sort of key points about like goals or objectives of the program?
Sure. I mean, the overall objective is to manage access, to ensure that that people have access to their homes, and that other visitors or users still have access to those blocks as well as needed, but that we can create the turnover to ensure that access. You know, if streets are completely overcrowded with cars, it can create some dangerous scenarios. So that access becomes an important piece of the puzzle.
Okay, and access really means, I mean, I could have some different definitions, but really that means the spaces to park the car. That's really what we mean, right? Like,
right.
That's sort of the mechanical thing we're trying to figure out. Okay. And so RAMP will address the issue of finite number of spaces to park the car and perhaps too many cars to go there, through through these measures. Fine. Okay, Tila, did you want to follow up?
Well, when we're ready for discussion, but that's, I have no other questions at the moment.
Okay, sorry, I wasn't sure if you had like me to follow up that question. Okay. Okay. I guess this is just a comment. I'm maybe I'm not as smart as my colleagues, but I'm just kind of struggling with how to answer this question with respect to like what matters. Like what my first stop on most anything that comes forward tab is how does this support key TMP goals, particular mode shift, vision zero, vehicle miles traveled reduction, and GHG goals. I would love to understand better like how RAMP supports those, and then I could answer the question in terms of here's how I guess strategies might support the way we're driving down those goals. But I guess I'm not sure if I have enough of a connection to comment. So I'll let others weigh in, and then maybe I'll find further inspiration.
So Ryan, if I could, the statement that you've just made is in fact really pertinent feedback. So, I mean, I would summarize basically what you said as, when you come back, make sure it's clear how your policy aligns with transportation goals.
Great. Yeah, that's great. And I would specify the four from the TMP that I mentioned, yeah, and love to see strategies for those. Great. Okay. Good.
Thank you.
Tila, how about you? And then Trini after you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I have very generally negative feelings, but mixed feelings about the neighborhood parking permit program, now RAMP. And in particular, because I think it tends to lead to over expansion. And so I do think that when new blocks have been identified, namely when they've petitioned, we should be looking at the extent to which their petition is driven by spillover parking. That is, we should be looking at how existing the contiguous block or blocks are performing. And if we are consistently seeing that they're parked well below 60%, then I think we have set our threshold at the wrong spot. to say that we should be adding more preferential treatment of residents on our city streets that are public property. I think I have seen how the Mapleton NPP operates. And I agree that there is a lot more congestion and demand on the western end of it or on the eastern end of it, closer to, the trip generators as expected, than here on the western end. And the western end and western expansions have been driven by spillover parking only. And so I think it's really quite important to be trying to mitigate that, not by excluding other neighbors and other people further away, but by making sure that we're managing the curbside a little bit better. So I would include underperformance or under parking of existing NPP blocks or ramp blocks to be part of that determination about whether you need to add on additional blocks to the zone. I would look at density of housing. One of the Mapleton Hill NPP blocks has 8 houses on it, and I fail to see how 2 sides of the street should be blocked off for the use of 8 households without anything more flexible than a commuter permit. I think we should be looking at whether we can allow neighbors who live on nearby blocks or contiguous blocks should be allowed to purchase at the whatever going rate is for actual on-block residents a permit for inside the MPP, even if they're across the street. If they had more places that they could park and could also park in the NPP, they might be less anxious to cordon off the rest of the public from their own streets. So I think that there are a few things that we can be doing about adjusting the way that some parts of the MPPs are performing that creates negative incentives and unnecessarily forecloses the use of public property by the general public. Should adjacent blocks need a petition? Well, I have a problem with the petitioning as well, because petitioning is mostly available to people who have a lot of time and a lot of entitlement and feel very comfortable interacting with their city. And it's analogous to a situation where we had a petition process for the NSMP, and we had a low performing or a low income neighborhood, a trailer park that did not feel comfortable doing a petition because they felt it was antagonistic to their landlords. So I certainly wouldn't ask additional blocks to petition to be included. I have a problem with the petitioning process in general. And I don't know, because this happened long before I came to Boulder, but I know that there was a different process that, to my understanding, is not consistent with the then regulations about limiting the number of resident permits on part of the Pearl Street, the West Pearl NPP zone, because there were some denser apartment buildings, and there was a concern raised by the non-apartment dwellers that the apartment dwellers would hog all of the parking permits. So I think that the density or lack of density in neighborhoods should definitely be a consideration when you are determining whether additional blocks need to be added. How will the city determine how non-permit parking should be regulated within new zones? You guys are smart people, and I actually don't want to be over prescribing the tools that you use. I think that we've learned a lot from camp to have part time of the year and reasonable free parking for a reasonable time. But if you're going to stay longer than that, you got to pay for a little bit. I think that was a really nice, flexible way, and it was pretty popular. And so I would look to camp actually to figure out how non-permit parking gets regulated. The other thing that I have trouble with, and how the NPP, I'm just going to keep calling it NPP, sorry, how the current permit parking regulation happens, is the 1 time per day problem. To my mind, someone coming and parking for 3 hours and then coming and moving their car to another available space is not really a problem if there's another available space. In fact, there's the regulations are assuming that, you know, we need to have roughly 40% or at least 20% of spots available on any given block. And if the person is going to go to the effort for the sake of free parking to walk a few blocks, park their car, then come back in 3 hours, move it, and they can find another space, and it's not such a hassle that they're, you know, looking around for parking. I don't know that that's happening. They ought to be allowed to park twice. And certain trip generators tend to generate, I'm thinking of schools, tend to generate 2 motor vehicle trips a day that are both very short. And yet the 1 time per day problem means that a parent dropping off a kid at an elementary school and walking them to school might get a ticket if they park and, I don't know, deliver stuff for a school party and stay for, you know, 20 minutes or half an hour at a different time of day. And they're not really causing a congestion parking problem in a way that this program was designed to mitigate. I myself have gotten a ticket for parking twice near my son's school when he was in elementary school because I came for an assembly in the morning. And so I stayed for more than 5 minutes and I got, you know, it was noted, and then I came to pick him up. I think he was sick that day, and then I got a ticket. And it didn't seem like what we were trying to avoid doing. So I think there are a lot of ways that we ought to be a little bit more flexible and can be more flexible about how we allow non-permit parking to happen. And I think we've learned a lot from how the city's done it in the past. Camp has been great.
Okay, Trini? You might be on mute. Trini, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I guess my only question, and it stems off absolute ignorance. I don't know what the funding that comes out of this program goes to. And if it would be possible, if it's not being allocated this way already, for it to support neighborhood, like individual neighborhood Vision Zero projects. No?
Sorry, my understanding is that the program doesn't even pay for itself. Enforcement is more expensive than the fees that are coming in, but we're raising the fees, and that may be getting closer to parity.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, I don't know if Samantha, you have anything you'd add to that. I'm not knowledgeable about where the funding, if there was an overage, and if there's an overage, where that would go. But I do think
Right.
Tila's right that I don't think there's an overage.
Right. Tila's right. That was something that was identified back in the revitalizing access and Boulder work of 2019 and 2020, and and still is a priority for RAMP. And so we're following a prescribed plan that was set in place to raise the permit pricing over time to get to cost recovery. And in the future, we'll be looking at if there are overages, could we offer additional benefits like a transportation wallet pilot or transportation wallet essentially. So that's in the next phases of RAMP that will be coming up in the coming years, but hopefully that helps answer the question.
Thank you.
Trini, anything else from you? Okay, Becky, anything from you?
Yeah, thanks. I echo what Tila said about petitioning. I generally, I feel like all this work has been done to create this data-driven program. And so, let's use the data. I don't know what the cutoff is exactly in that for deciding where to stop looking at adjacent blocks, but I do think while, we don't necessarily need to abandon petitions altogether, I do think they should not be emphasized as a decision-making factor for the reasons Tila stated, that some people will have more access to them than others or more awareness of them, and that is going to align with other forms of privilege. And so we just don't, would not want a big reliance on petitioning as one of the driving decision makers for adding blocks. So that kind of covers my feeling, but question one, Oh, and I also agree with Tila's statement around density of housing. I think is a great way to be looking at it. Question 2, similarly, I don't have a strong, I don't have a lot of depth of knowledge here on which strategies, and I feel like I trust those of you who have been spending a long time thinking about it and learning about it to kind of make those decisions. Thank you.
Okay, I think I'm the last word for now. So I guess a couple thoughts on the first question. So when new blocks have been identified, how is it determined if additional blocks should be added? I suppose I agree with Tila, but even in stronger terms about not being a huge fan of the residential program. I know these programs exist in other cities. Boulder's not the only one that does it, but in general, I'm just not a huge fan of socializing car storage on public property. I think it's generally not consistent with our mode shift goals, not consistent with our vehicle miles traveled reduction goals. It's not consistent with climate action. I think it tends to unnecessarily use public resources for things that private markets can respond to. But we're used to it because we've got these neighborhood permit programs in place that people sort of expect. So to the extent we need to do them, my preference would be to say stop further action on them until we can show how the initiative will on net reduce VMT and increase mode shift to other modes. And I suppose one prong of that might just be the pricing, and I'm not sure to what extent that's in scope for this discussion, but some of what I know of Donald Shoup-Shouponomics on this topic is that there's I think it's considered to be a best practice of using parking money from parking in the area that the parking revenue is generated to fund local facilities and multimodal assets activities. So I suppose I would encourage that kind of thinking as much as possible. Is don't, let's not give away things that people will, they don't really need socialized, and let's use our public resources to generate as much funding as we can to invest in those local blocks and neighborhoods for the modal facilities. So that's a little broader than maybe even outside of what you're directly asking. And I guess I don't have much more specificity. For question 2, how will city determine how non-permit parking shall be regulated with the new zones? I don't have much more on that either. Kind of a similar concept. I would just hope that in general we are looking at this program in terms of how it will contribute to those TMP goals, and are able to describe through whatever the answers are to this, how that happens. And if it doesn't happen, then I think we're going to have to, I don't know, then we have a disconnect. So that's it for me. Anything else from tab members?
Ryan, real quick.
Tila.
Just to respond to your first point, which I totally agree with, about sort of encouraging unnecessary vehicle use and storage on our streets. Just to be clarified, though, that this program is already here and they're asking us how to tweak it. And I have even more problems with giving preferential low pricing to people who live in basically desirable areas because they're near activity generators in important parts of the city, for cheap storage of their own vehicles and those of people in their household, but not to other neighbors and not to a variety of people who come to do legitimate business in the neighborhood. So to the extent that I'm asked how to prioritize who gets to pay what for storing the vehicle, assuming that the storage of the vehicle is a given, I really object to the way that this is structured and designed.
Thanks, Teal. Okay, anything else from Tab? Looks like Becky's maybe a no, Trina, no. Bill, Samantha, I hope that was helpful, not too dour. Anything else we can do for you at this point?
No, that was fantastic feedback. Thank you so much. And we look forward to coming back, and hopefully our recommendations will meet your expectations.
Thank you
Nice to
both.
see you, Bill.
Looking forward
Great
to
to see you as well.
Okay, oh, hey Valerie. I think we're on to the next item, which, if I have my notes in order here, is briefing on citywide departmental racial equity work.
And Ryan, and Veronica, before we get to this item, we have a special guest item from Councilmember Spear. Out of respect for her time tonight, she did have a quick announcement that she wanted to make, and so she'll go next, followed by the racial equity presentation.
That's totally fine. I'm also with you for the long haul, so I'm gonna ride it out with you. But anyway, thank you. I just came out of the DRCOG sub-regional forum this morning, and well, this afternoon. Staff had recommended maybe fun to give you all an update on where we're at coming out of that. So just as a reminder for anybody listening that doesn't remember about the DRCOG sub-regional forum, this is made up of a DRCOG director from Boulder County and from each city that is within Boulder County. At the meeting, we were working on approving the recommendations for the TIP projects that I know you all heard about meeting or two back, but Longmont injected some last minute excitement into the meeting. They had just identified alternative funding for one of their really high scoring projects that was recommended to us for funding to design bat lanes along Highway 119. And so at the last minute, they generously offered to give up about $1.4 million in funding that we were about to recommend for that project. So thanks to quick thinking by our staff, Garrett Slater and Jane Sanson, and then Alex Hydewright in the county, our highly scored but not fully funded Folsom Street multimodal study got an extra $400,000 of that funding. So the sub-regional forum opted to recommend that project for just about full funding. And then just a couple of other things that you all may be interested in hearing about that came out of the recommendations today. The other $1 million went to a Superflex demand response transit service that's going to help out some of the areas in Southeast Boulder County that haven't really received much in this TIP cycle. And then our 30th Street multimodal improvements project, you'll probably remember, was recommended for funding for design and construction from Aurora to Colorado, and for design from Baseline to Aurora. And then some of the other projects that seemed especially relevant to Boulder that we're recommending. There's a feasibility study moving forward for a Lafayette Louisville Boulder bikeway, which is really exciting. There's a South Boulder Road bus rapid transit study from Lafayette, kind of near the WOW Museum, if folks know where that is, to Table Mesa and Broadway. And then there's going to be a countywide strategic transit plan to help us think more holistically about our regional transit goals. Trini, I think you'll be really excited about this one, especially a Boulder County Vision Zero Safe Routes to School action plan that's going to help us come up with some goals and strategies for improving kids' safety when they're walking and biking to and from school. And then a little bit of money for the highway, well, a little bit, it's like $3 million for the Highway 119 bikeway from the Niwot Bus Rapid Transit Station to Airport Road. And then we also approved a wait list of projects that will be funded if and when some of those other funds become available due to other projects changing their funding needs or being delayed or anything. And then because our applications scored so highly, our projects are actually 1 and 2 on the waiting list. So if more funds become available, we will get first dibs for the remaining money for the 30th Street multimodal improvements and the Colorado Avenue project. So next steps are that the DRCOG advisory group is going to look these over in April, and then the list of recommended projects will come to DRCOG in August for final approval. So it's moving along relatively quickly for the transportation world, it seems.
Thank you, Councilmember Spear. That was great. That's great news and a lot of really useful information to get updated on. Did I see a hand? Becky, did you have a hand? No?
Yeah, that was a misclick, but thank you for the update. It's great to hear.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, it was fresh off the presses.
Thank you.
And yeah, nice to see you all tonight. Thanks for letting me chime in.
Great. Okay. Shall we move on then to the racial equity plan update?
I believe Natalie had to step away for a minute. Nope, she's back.
Thank you. Thanks for taking the reins there, Valerie. Yes, so I am going to provide a kind of brief update, but just to give Tab an update on the work that our department in the city has been doing on racial equity over the last really couple of years. And you certainly hear about it kind of project by project, but I wanted to give a just opportunity for you to hear kind of more holistically and the bigger picture around the work that we're doing. So with that, I'll just dive right in. This is some of these are kind of screen grabs from the racial equity plan. And many folks kind of ask this first question around the city's racial equity work, around why lead with racial equity. And you can see here, race is often the greatest predictor of access to success in our current system. The creation and perpetuation of racial inequities is embedded into government at all levels. Initially focusing on racial equity provides the opportunity to introduce a framework, tools, and resources that can also be applied to other marginalized groups based on gender, sexual orientation, ability, class, and age, among others. Next slide. So you probably have all seen this graphic. I feel like it's used a lot in kind of the transportation and equity space. So just to highlight here, for equity, we're really focused on giving everybody what they need to help them be successful and meet them where they are. In this case, you can see it shows that you give everybody a different kind of bike so that everyone can enjoy a bike ride. And so that's really kind of the next slide, please. As you look at the racial equity plan for the city, that kind of tees up that the work that we're doing. And so with that, in December of 2019, City Council adopted a resolution which recognizes historic and institutional race-based inequity and affirms the city's commitment to address racial injustice. Since that time in 2019, the city has adopted the racial equity plan. That was in February of 2021, which provides guidance for how the city can understand the role systemic and institutional racism has played in perpetuating current racial inequities. The plan also provides guidance for how city staff and departments can build awareness, address inequity, and support inclusion and diversity in programs, policies, and decision-making. As such, the Transportation Mobility Department has been reevaluating current practices for opportunities to advance racial equity work. Next slide, please. So the racial equity plan has 5 goals and associated strategies that guide the work for the city and the departments. These 5 goals are: everybody gets it, justly do it, community commitment, power to all people, and representation matters. Next slide, please. So I'm going to quickly just dive into some of the work that the department is doing in each of these goal areas. This first goal, I'm not going to read the whole goal, but I'll just speak to some of the work that we're doing in this area. We've been really focused on training staff. Beyond just required training, the bias and microaggression training, many of our staff are also taking the Advancing Racial Equity, the Role in Government course, and then also the Racial Equity Instrument Introduction and Best Practices. And that's really geared towards folks that are going to be implementing that in the work that they're doing. And you often hear from our staff about the ways that they're implementing the racial equity instrument into projects. For example, with snow and ice control tonight, or the snow and ice review program tonight, you heard about how that's been implemented as part of that project. And next slide. And then around the second goal, we have done a couple things, really focused on a couple things around developing a department JEDI team. This was a tangible directive of the racial equity plan, was to develop each department to develop a justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion JEDI team. The goal of these JEDI teams is to raise awareness of racial equity issues and identify ways to implement the city's racial equity plan and operationalize the work in the departments. The first significant step in the process is to perform a departmental assessment, which will be starting this year, which includes a gap analysis and a plan to understand what the department is already doing to address racial equity and identify and recommend specific strategies for implementation in the coming years. Guidance provided to the JEDI teams really stresses the importance of starting equity work now and not waiting for a fully developed work plan or recommendation to begin. Rather, departments are encouraged to start small and apply JEDI concepts concurrently with more formal planning and integration. In addition to that, or more on the JEDI work, we've developed a team with our colleagues in utilities and our business services division. And we started that work back in 2022, in the latter half of 2022. And then, as I mentioned, we'll begin the departmental assessment this year. The team has also taken on initial actions of tracking and promoting staff participation in the city trainings that I mentioned. And then other areas flagged for evaluation as part of the assessment are recruiting and hiring practices and CIP considerations. And then other work in this goal area includes adjusting delivery methods and addressing language access issues to reach a broader and more diverse audience through our ongoing engagement activities. And then just finally, again, the racial equity instrument and rapid assessment tool has really been a key piece of the school area and that we're doing in the work in the various projects and programs that we're doing. CAN has been a really good example of where this work has been integrated into. Next slide, please. This third goal is around community commitment. The organization as a whole is really focused on this goal. We have a work effort citywide around procurement practices, so more to come on that work. Next slide. For goal 4, we continue the practice of engaging with our community connectors. The Transportation and Mobility Department has really kind of been a leading department in this work over the last many years since we developed our Community Connectors program. So you often hear about how we're engaging with our community connectors and the work that we're doing. And then also using micro engagements, which is really just engaging with folks in smaller groups and meeting them where they are to practice more just, equitable, and inclusive engagement. Next slide. And then finally, in 2022, around goal 5, representation matters, the department participated in the city manager's office series of workshops around healthy and productive meeting atmospheres for boards and commissions. And we're continuing to work with CMO around how we implement that work. And next slide. So for next steps, we'll continue a lot of the work that I mentioned here. We have some specific items kind of laid out for us in 2023 around the departmental assessment, beginning to plan for the development of the department's racial equity plan. Each department will develop their own racial equity plan, and then continuing to apply all the tools and instruments and working with our Community Connectors program around all of the various projects and programs that we're doing. And we'll come back and keep you informed about just what we're doing in the realm of racial equity as a department as a whole. Next slide. And that's all I have. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Natalie, thanks very much. Yeah, why don't we see if there's any questions from TAB colleagues?
I have a question. I just want to thank Natalie for all the work that she did on this and just to stress how important this is moving forward, you know, as a community. And just, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Trini.
Thanks, Trini. Sheila.
Thanks, Ryan. Natalie, when would the boards expect to be receiving some of this training?
That is a great question. And I know I got an update about that, I think via email in the last week or so. So I'll have to go back and look at that. But I do recall that they were working on making an additional training available. And I think they came to some, because you guys filled out a survey around, or maybe I filled out the survey on your behalf around that additional training. So that is coming, and I will share that in kind of our next standing agenda meeting so that you guys get that information.
Thanks, Tila. Becky, anything from you?
No questions. I've appreciated seeing this work kind of show up throughout projects that have come before TAB, including the Vision Zero action plan today. So yeah, it's really great to see that permeating throughout all the work that's being done. So thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, I think like really kudos to the department staff. Everyone I feel like has just kind of welcomed it with open arms and really understand just how important it is and how it really helps us do a better job to serve our community. So yeah, it's really great to see just the reception.
Great. Natalie, I'll offer, I'm not sure if this is, I think this is a question. First of all, thanks. I'm glad to see the progress on this and your dedication and your team's dedication. One thing I've noticed along the way is there's a lot of community interest in supporting the work and being a part of just in advocacy of transportation projects to being thoughtful about the racial equity aspects. And it sort of leads me to a question of, does this go to a place in which advocates and community members can be a part of the, I guess, the advocacy or part of, through their advocacy, be supportive of the things that the department, or I guess the city, decides it's trying to do? Or is this more of an internal sort of an exercise? And so there's not so much of an obvious way to say to the community, hey, if you're interested in, or I suppose here's how you, when weighing in or coming to talk to us, here's how to, I don't know, be supportive. I'm not sure if it's a very articulate, like it's definitely not an articulate question, but I'm just noticing, like, looking through the milestones and wondering if there's a point where we get to, here, hey, community, who, here's some tools that you can expect to use, or how we will evaluate projects and so that you know about this. Does that seem like something that's on the horizon, or not?
Yeah, I mean, and my colleagues may have ideas. In fact, I see, and I don't mean to call out anyone, there are folks on the call that are participating in this work and have significant just roles in the work that we're doing as a department. So feel free to chime in. And I would say, some of it definitely is kind of inward facing, but as I mentioned, like a lot of the work that we're doing around community engagement is really focused on engaging with folks that are typically underrepresented or underserved. And so I think just like helping us lift up those opportunities, right, when we're doing, engagement activities with our community connectors, or even if it's from like a technical analysis space around the racial equity index that you saw, that showed up in the Vision Zero action plan. I think just being able to support that work is valuable. And hopefully that kind of answers your question. And if others have anything to add, feel free.
Thank you. Okay, great. Well, thank you, Natalie and team, for this. Yep. Anything else from anybody? Okay.
That's all we had under matters from staff.
Okay, very good. Let's move on then to matters from the board. I have one item, I'll ask for a short update on North Broadway, but why don't we see if any, Tila, Becky, or Trini, do you have anything you want to cover besides that? No from Becky, no from Trini.
I
Tila?
was just noting that we'd gotten several, emails and in addition to the public comment tonight about North Broadway. So I was also going to inquire if there was any movement or when we should expect more detailed whatever. Go ahead, Ryan. That's what was on my agenda as well.
Okay, great. Then maybe Natalie, I'll just say a quick word, which is just that we discussed North Broadway at the last meeting and talked in some depth about it. There was a hotline email from Nuria, city manager, on 24th that had some direction, and then there's been quite a bit of correspondence through the tab email address from the community, and I think otherwise, including a pretty good amount of things today. So yeah, if you now be willing to just sort of provide an update on where are we headed with North Broadway?
Yes, yeah, thanks, Ryan. So I can kind of provide, for those that may not have seen the hotline that Nuria shared back, it was a couple weeks ago, February 24th. So we had shared at that was just, I think, pretty close following the February TAB meeting. And we had talked about that we would follow up with some ways to just address things that weren't, hugely capital intensive, but to try to improve the situation on North Broadway. So some of the things that we had identified were completing the final striping of the bike facility to clearly demarcate the on-street parking space from the bike facility. So we completed that striping since her update, I think, since the hotline update. We also identified that we would explore prohibiting overnight parking through basically snow and ice season. And since then, we have implemented that. I believe the team went out and signed that about a week ago. And then we are also just given our colleagues in community vitality and parking enforcement a heads up that this area needs additional attention around making sure that people are following code around the distance that they're parking from the curb. So we're hopefully seeing stepped up in parking enforcement out there. And then we also were planning to post additional signage and develop signage to educate drivers that it's a shared space. And the team quickly worked on that and developed some signage that I believe is going to be installed this week. And that really is focused on educating the drivers that they need to park closer to the curb and to expect cyclists traveling down the bike lane. So those were kind of the main areas that we had identified, and that's kind of the progress update on those things that we were able to kind of do in the immediate term. And then, as far as, the comments that you've heard from the community, and I've had some conversations just back and forth with Becky around, what's possible around removing parking on North Broadway. And I kind of shared some of the history around that. And I'd had some conversations with the city attorney's office around the preferred kind of path around that, just given past community engagement in the adopted sub-community plan for the area. And so really kind of staff's recommendation was that if that was something, if parking removal was something that wanted to be pursued, that really would be something for planning board and council to consider as part of an amendment to the North Boulder sub-community plan. So that's kind of all the updates that I have just over the last couple of weeks, the work that staff has been doing. And I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you. Any TAB colleagues want to ask or say anything?
Regarding parking and trucks, do you have any limitations that would prohibit trucks parking there?
I'm not aware of anything beyond just as far as like where they're parking. I don't know that there's a specific type of vehicle that we can allow or disallow. I might look to Devin if he has any knowledge of that.
There are currently no restrictions on trucks.
Is that something that's even?
So
allowable,
I
guess,
think
per code?
the code, I think, would apply in terms of if a truck is so large that it cannot fit in the parking lane, it
Right.
could be cited if it's parked there. But there's no other restrictions in place.
Thanks.
I just have one follow-up then. Natalie, thank you for all that. And I think I heard you say the matter of considering removing parking is out of the department's hands. It would be up to council. You said council/planning board, but I think it's really council. Okay, so it's a combination of them. Do you need anything from TAB to endorse the department nudging the council to look at that, or what would the considerations be with, I guess, helping council understand their options with respect to that?
So I mean, I'm not sure. I guess I'll have to go back and think about that, of kind of what the path would be for council to ask us to do that. Yeah, I'd have to go back and think about that.
Okay, not to put you on the spot, I guess I'm just trying to think this through. If we have a significant number of share and number of community members who are telling council they'd like the change, and council's asking the department, okay, like what's possible and practical here, and if, you know, as long as they understand that they could make a spot change to the sub community plan, and they could just do that, and that would unlock some of the potential here. That would seem like a pretty important part of the puzzle. I'm just sort of hypothetical.
Yeah. Well, I should say, you know, amending the sub-community plan would essentially become a work plan item, right? So it would be something that we would then have to basically prioritize if that was something that council wanted us to do. And that's obviously not on the work plan right now. And we would have to move something, right? Like something would have to go be on pause so we could free up some capacity to work on that. It also involves PNDS staff to help us with a plan amendment like that. So it certainly has repercussions on work plan. And, you know, would require a community engagement process around updating the sub-community plan.
Okay.
And it goes to planning board before it goes to council, an amendment like that.
So even if council said, we want to do this, they can't just take a red pen to the code and be done with it. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
I have a follow-up
Thank you.
question. Sorry, Ryan, I have a follow-up question on that. And yeah, thanks for kind of sorting all this out, Natalie, and in terms of process and everything. And I guess my question is, what dictates the sub community, like what makes the sub community plan so rigid? Like what dictates the community engagement process? And this is definitely comes back to my question earlier in the evening, which is like prioritization of Vision Zero throughout all of the work that the city does. And to me, it feels like sub community plan is a barrier to Vision Zero. And that's like really, that's a kind of a tough place to be in, I think, for everyone. And so, yeah, I guess I'm wondering what dictates like needing to do a very extensive process to make change to a sub-community plan, or if you might be able to explain that to me.
I mean, I can try. So, I mean, I think it's all just everything comes down to trade-off conversations, right? And so the precedent around sub-community plans is that they have an engagement process that allows multiple voices in the community to have a seat in the process and to voice their desires for a particular area. I mean, I'm not a PNDS planner, so I can't really speak to the exact steps of a sub-community plan amendment, but it's certainly like a public process so that you're hearing from various stakeholders. And if we, Vision Zero, right, is one goal as a part of the overall goals of the city. And potentially another stakeholder would have a different goal that might be at odds with that around having on-street parking available for their businesses. And that's where there's an opportunity for public process to kind of make a decision about the future of that space. And that would be why it would be important for council to be a part of that, right? And be guiding that process.
Yeah, thanks. So what I'm hearing is maybe like, but there isn't necessarily like an ordinance, or there isn't a rule that certain community, there isn't like a certain, or maybe there is, maybe planning would say, oh no, we do have to, by ordinance, we have to engage in this way before we could change this section of parking because it's part of a sub-community plan.
Yeah, I'm not
just like
actually
precedent.
sure about all of the like engagement steps that might be required around a sub-community plan, but that's something that I could follow up with our PNDS colleagues on.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, because I'm interested, I mean, for this particular section, because I feel like it's just like it's such a high risk situation. But also I guess I'm also interested because I'm worried about this as like a precedent for like as a barrier to, for instance, our Vision Zero action plan succeeding. If like sub-community plans supersede Vision Zero actions, then it feels almost impossible to get to Vision Zero, you know, if they're just these conflicting things and one of them is, you know, clearly supersedes and it doesn't support Vision Zero. So I'm sure there's much bigger conversations that go into thinking holistically like that across, as you mentioned, across like departments, across all government. But you know, if there's an opportunity to use this example as a way to think about or preempt that in future situations.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've identified like a really important, like we have been having a conversation as an organization about this, of why there's a need to, you know, kind of do that like citywide strategic planning, what the goals of the city, you know, the entire city are, and then how that informs and trickles down into the work across departments, and where do master plans and sub-community plans and all of that live in the order of things. And I don't know that we have an answer, but I think you're raising a point that, you know, is why it makes it kind of difficult for us to be able to just kind of have like, to not have to have the trade-off conversations, I guess. Or you have to have them at every single little thing that you do.
Well, thanks. Yeah. Appreciate you helping me understand that. Yeah, I'd love to keep kind of pursuing this line of thought to figure out, you know, what planning says. And, you know, my concern being just that it could be a very long time until otherwise this road changes, and that it's on the high risk network. It's on kind of all the, I guess all the data points towards it needing to be a safer space. And I just don't want to kind of miss the opportunity to make at least some change in the short term. So.
I guess if I can chime in, I guess I would assume that it has to do with the business owners wanting parking available in front of their businesses. However, that particular area has so much parking available. I mean, there's allocated parking in the back, on the side streets. I mean, there really is potential for additional parking. It doesn't have to be right in front of the business. I go there a lot, both as a cyclist and as a customer. My dentist is there, and I almost never park in front of his, you know, business. I go to the back. There's plenty of parking. But, you know, hopefully that'll be something positive in the conversation moving forward regarding parking. And I just wanted to add 2 suggestions that seem to be pretty easy and not very expensive from our friends at Community Cycles. They're suggesting strategically placed flexible delineators. I don't know how complicated that would be at the moment, but it seems like a pretty fair ask. And also to paint to separate the travel lane with the edge of the vertical separation. So there's a visual, I suppose, that is very clear. So just adding a little paint. And this is in the meantime while there's like a long-term solution.
Yeah, we did add paint on the basically the outside part of the bike lane where the mountable curb kind
Oh,
of
okay, good.
begins.
All right.
So there is that, like, basically the kind of the bike lane now is demarcated with stripes on both sides.
Okay.
And then the delineators is something that we have talked about. I think we would need to go back and kind of take a closer look at where that would kind of make sense from the standpoint of, you know, people kind of coming and going.
Because I
from the
think that
parking.
would add such a like an added, well, a layer of feeling of safety to people that are traveling there currently as cyclists. I think that it's a little buffer, you know, which is unfortunately what we could aim for at the moment, right? But I don't know. But yeah, obviously they have to be strategically placed.
I'm looking at the clock here. I'm hoping to get us out on time. I have maybe just one final thought on this, but is anybody else need to weigh in or wish to weigh in on this before we? Okay, Natalie, thanks for everything. I just one thought as I'm following the conversation. I'm feeling unsure on who has the decision here, because I had this idea that these processes ultimately are things well, if they're accountable to city code, in many cases council could make the political or the values decision to just say we're just gonna do this, we're gonna change a 25-year-old plan that's been sitting there to just get rid of some parking, service of our modern, you know, a multitude of modern objectives, and that the way that we do public engagement, they're norms, but it's not they're norms, but that are subservient to the wider mandate coming from council's direction. But I could be wrong, and maybe there is something that's more codified or a legal reason that would stand in the way. But either way, I'm guessing a lot of other people probably have this question too, and this may or may not, you know, fall within the transportation department. So I guess to ultimately make the decision on. So I think a lot of other people would probably be very interested to sort of figure this out, like who actually owns the decision on whether we can change the the sub-community plan or not. So I don't mean to say you have to figure it out, because this might be a big task, but just to point out that I feel unsure on who actually has the decision.
Okay. Yeah, I can help clarify that and follow up.
Right. Thank you.
And you
Okay.
guys- Ryan,
go
I
ahead.
just want to say something. So this is my last official meeting. So my cycle ends and I've applied again. So hopefully I get to see you guys in April, but if I don't, it's been a pleasure. And thank you so much. I've learned a ton, and, you know, and good luck. And please keep us safe. But
So
hopefully I'll be back.
Trini, thank you. Can I tell you, we had the agenda meeting. Nobody followed up with you on this, but there was a question of should we do something special for you, and the answer was we're going to haul you back in here if we have to do that. So we'll this is not goodbye. We'll have you back here one way or another very, very soon, if not the next
Thank
meeting.
you. Well, I hope I'm here next month.
Good. Okay. So I think that does it for matters from the board. Okay, great. And then we have, I think, one more item. Let me find my sheet here. Future agenda topics. Natalie, I'm realizing I don't have in front of me a list or draft list. Is that my job? Or are we doing a break? I thought we used to have
So-
like, we had a draft list. I'm just not seeing it in front of me.
So our practice is to just drop them into the agenda under future agenda topics, what we have tentatively planned. So for April, there's the camp pilot evaluation. Sorry, are other people seeing this or is it just me?
What are you looking at?
There are a couple versions of the agenda. I've got them both in front of me and one has them. I don't know which one was the update, but well, I assume the one, no, I do know which one is the update. But that one, the updated one has the list, but if you don't have that,
Okay.
Ryan, you might not see it.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, so I'm reading, I guess, the one from the updated one. And then we have the DCS section 2.03 will be coming in actually, yeah, either April or May. And then we have tab feedback on a CAN update that'll probably be more like June. And then our e-bike rebate pilot, we'll be sharing out some information on that in the May, June timeframe as well.
Great. Anybody want to add or discuss? No. Okay. I don't have anything. Natalie, do you need anything else from us or?
No, I think we're good. Thank you.
I move to
Okay.
adjourn.
Okay, do I have a second? Okay, all in favor? Okay, meeting's adjourned.
Nice
Thanks.
job, Ryan.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.